Chapter 495. Welcome back. Jedi smiled and opened his arms. Although Guevara did not describe the battle in detail, Jedis and Gao Bin knew very well that Han Jin's strength was not likely to be stronger than the fallen angel Catherine. There must have been a lot of near-death experiences. Therefore, Jedis and Gao Bin brought people to welcome him more than 20 miles away, which was a kind of consolation. Han Jin and Jeds gave each other a gentle hug, and their eyes swept across the welcoming crowd. What's the big deal? Not only did the Legion commanders and generals who stayed behind come out of the city to welcome them, but there were also hundreds of family representatives sent by the nobles. What was more surprising was that behind the crowd, there were girls dressed to the nines, each holding a fresh flower in their hands. The sea of bright flowers stretched as far as the eye could see. Han Jin knew that under Dismark's rule, the Holy Crown City was a relatively prosperous city with a large population. However, he did not expect there to be so many girls. Did Jedis mobilize the whole city? The residents volunteered for this. Jedis laughed. Bullshit. Han Jin did not believe it at all. Even if Jedis did not force the civilians in the city, he must have issued a call in the name of the Holy See. Didn't you want to get countless girls? Congratulations, you've gotten what you wanted. Yelena said eerily behind Han Jin. You, who told you that? Han Jin was stunned. Sister Sunir told me. Yelena narrowed her eyes. Are you happy? I just said it casually. She's too sensitive. Han Jin sighed. I guess you're just as sensitive. What's wrong with being sensitive? Yelena did not understand Han Jin's double entendre. She shook her head proudly, and then said in an almost inaudible voice, I must keep an eye on you, Jedis. Don't tell me we have to walk back like this? Han Jin couldn't be bothered with Yelena. After all, his evil hands could reach out to her at any time. If she really pissed him off, she would suffer. Let's go back. There are a lot of people who want to see you with their own eyes, Jed said. It's really the residents who willingly came to welcome you. I would never. I know you never lie. Han Jin looked at the sea of people in front of him helplessly. Raphael, why is your cloak crooked? Only then did Yelena notice that Han Jin's cloak was slanted to one side, and the left and right sides were not symmetrical. As she spoke, she helped Han Jin tidy it up. I was in too much of a hurry when I came out, so I didn't notice, Han Jin said. What did you do? Are you that busy? Han Jin paused and complained. How could I have known that you would come to this place to welcome me? Raphael, shouldn't you say something? Gao Bin said. Say what? Han Jin's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Gao Bin was hinting that he should call him Big Brother. No way. Sunir didn't come out at all. How did Gao Bin know? The news that you defeated the fallen angel Catherine has caused a reaction in the Holy Crown City. It can no longer be described as a sensation, it's more like an earthquake. The Abyssal race has launched an invasion war, and everyone is living in fear of the future. Now everyone thinks that you can protect them. Gao Bin said slowly. Facing these pairs of expectant eyes, shouldn't you say something encouraging? I didn't prepare anything. Han Jin's expression became a little strange. You don't need to prepare at all. Gao Bin smiled. Do as I say. Raise your right hand above your head, clench it into a fist, and shout as loud as you can, Holy Crown City will win. Big Brother, please spare me. Han Jin's expression became even more strange. It's too corny, I can feel a layer of goosebumps on my back. Raphael, compared to Nicholas, you lack the charisma of a leader. Jed said. What's wrong with that? If it were Nicholas, he would definitely be much more corny than you. Don't hesitate, you know, everyone is waiting for your voice. Jeds, you still have the nerve to interrupt? I was wondering why you were so affectionate today. It turned out that you were just doing it for others to see, to prove your position as Jeds' leader. You are really insidious. Han Jin squinted at Jeds. Also, being thick-skinned has nothing to do with the charisma of a leader, right? It's useless. It doesn't matter if you're trying to change the topic or divert attention. It's useless. Shout. Raphael. Jed smiled. Unless you can ignore everyone's feelings. Although Han Jin's face was full of smiles, his heart was extremely conflicted. In the face of a dangerous enemy, he could be the first to rush forward, but it was too difficult for him to put on a show in front of countless gazes. I can explain your accusation just now, Jed said. Jed said, a few days ago we used various facades to show the outside world the conflict between us. Now that you've defeated the fallen angel Catherine, our plan is worthless. We even have to prepare to face the great demon of the abyss, Donald. Under such circumstances, we have to tell everyone that we are united. The nobles like to use the word foolish to describe the commoners and slaves who live at the bottom. In fact, it's not that the commoners and slaves want to live ignorant lives, it's us who deliberately play with them and deceive them. Han Jin said indifferently. Yesterday we told them that you and I are enemies, and today we tell them that you and I are friends? Raphael, we have plenty of time to discuss this topic today, Guevara said softly. Now do what you have to do. Yes, Raphael, Gaobin said. Actually, what you see is only a small part. The girls were specially selected by us, and there are even more people gathered in the city. Your return date is not set, do you know that? Many people from the Acropolis rushed to the Holy Crown City last night. They have no place to stay, so they had to sleep on the streets. Thousands of people put down their work and gathered here from all directions, just to wait for you, for your promise. The diplomatic group from Cold Shadow City is also here, Jed said in a low voice. Over there, those guys wearing white magic robes, that's them. Raphael, they shouldn't have come, because they are loyal to Chesam, not you, but this is a war between two worlds, and your victory is their victory, so they are willing to cheer for you. Okay. Han Jin gave in to the collective will. Isn't it just a shout? Han Jin walked out of the crowd and slowly walked forward. Guevara, Majordomo Gale, Jeds, and the others stood behind Han Jin, like stars surrounding the moon. However, only Yelena stood on Han Jin's left, and there was no one on his right, so it seemed a little empty. Where's Sunir? Gaobin asked in a low voice. Raphael said that she has something to do, and will be out in a while. What time is this? She doesn't know what's important. Gaobin was a little anxious. The significance of this appearance was extraordinary. If it were any other occasion, Sunir could choose not to come, but she had to be here at this moment. Suddenly, a fragrant wind brushed past everyone. Sunir quickly passed the second group and stood on Han Jin's right. Sunir! Gaobin called out in a low voice. Brother? What's wrong? Sunir turned around. Gaobin was immediately stunned. In his impression, Sunir had always maintained an elegant temperament. When she walked, talked, and sat quietly, she always showed a kind of faintly discernible arrogance. But now, Sunir had become incomparably beautiful, especially her watery eyes, which were brimming with indescribable happiness and satisfaction. Seeing Gaobin's expression, Sunir seemed to understand something. She hurriedly avoided Gaobin's gaze and then turned back. Han Jin continued to walk forward, getting closer and closer to the crowd. When he was less than 50 meters away from the crowd, Han Jin suddenly stopped and quietly stopped there. The crowd became silent, and all eyes fell on Han Jin. Perhaps Han Jin really did not have the charisma of a leader like Nicholas, but Han Jin was handsome, sunny, and amiable. Nicholas could not learn his good points either. Han Jin slowly raised his right fist. The Holy Crown City will win. Han Jin's voice resounded over the plain like a thunderclap. The crowd was stunned for a moment, and then immediately boiled up, bursting into cheers. People laughed, jumped, and shouted, releasing the anxiety and fear that they had accumulated for a long time without reservation, and then abandoned it as if it were a pair of worn-out shoes. They had been living a humble life for thousands of years. They never asked for extravagant things, nor did they dare to ask for extravagant things. They just wanted a simple and ordinary happiness, to have food to eat, to have a house to live in, to get married and have children, and to spend their lives in obscurity. They endured and got used to being bullied. In the natural and man-made disasters, they always suffered the most and suffered the most. They admitted that they were unlucky. They offered part of their hard work in exchange for protection. They were willing to accept this unwritten contract. Of course, whether they would be protected or not was up to the superiors. Whether they had to offer the fruits of their labor or not was still up to the superiors. This also meant that this contract could be broken from the top to the bottom, and from the bottom to the top it would be treason. Some nobles were very open-minded. They knew how to appreciate the commoners and slaves who worked for them. They liked to praise those who supported them by saying that they were hard-working and hard-working. However, were hard-working and hard-working really complimentary words? Unfortunately, the ignorant people never thought why the nobles were not diligent and conscientious. Why did they have to work hard and bear complaints? The actions of the generals at the front were even wilder. Unlike the civilians, their worship for Han Jin had already been deeply rooted in their bones. In their eyes, Han Jin was an invincible lord who could sweep everything before him. Under the leadership of Han Jin, they had come from victory, and would surely go to the next victory. The cheers spread all the way to the Holy Crown City. Clusters of flowers were thrown up and scattered on the ground, forming a carpet of flowers more than 20 miles long. Han Jin did not agree with them. This was purely a waste of money and manpower. Perhaps people did gather in the Holy Crown City voluntarily, but too many flowers had clearly shown signs of deliberate action. After about 2 hours, the smile on Han Jin's face was somewhat stiff. Finally, they approached the south gate of the Holy Crown City. However, in the blink of an eye, countless heads popped up on the city wall, and the cheers sounded again. Finally, they arrived at the door of the Night of Bliss. The others were fine, but Yelena's forehead was covered with rows of small beads of sweat. She had walked dozens of miles and had to maintain the demeanor of a noble lady at all times. Those who had not experienced it could not imagine the hardship. Fortunately, Yelena had survived. As for whether there would be any sequelae, only she knew. After all, it was her first time experiencing such a big scene. "The banquet is held here?" Han Jin asked. "Yes, it's not convenient anywhere else," Jed said. "Occupy my place, use my people, spend my money, and then welcome me?" Han Jin was quite helpless. "You still care about this?" Jed's laugh. "If you allow me to expand my parish in the Acropolis, I can take the money for this banquet." "Forget it." Han Jin shook his head. He was worried that Jeds would misunderstand, so he added, "Jeds, I don't mean to restrict the development of the Holy See. Look at your Holy See now, how many people do you have? Do you know what it means to spoil things through excessive enthusiasm? I've heard you tell me this story." Jed sighed softly. "It's good that you understand." Han Jin noticed that Yelena's face was a little pale. He turned around and gently held her hand, whispering, "Are you tired?" "Not at all," Yelena answered straightforwardly. Although she was tired, she was still very happy. Today's appearance was a different kind of wedding. Even Pope Jeds was walking behind her. Everyone who witnessed this knew what it meant. At this moment, Hallister strode out of the Night of Bliss, followed by more than 20 beauties in white gauze dresses. "Sir, you won't blame me for not going out to greet you, right?" Hallister smiled apologetically. Then, he naturally looked around Han Jin. When he saw Sunir, his expression froze for a moment, then he immediately lowered his head and looked away. "Don't look around." Han Jin squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. Of course, he had heard from Chipango that Hallister was very popular with women and was very capable. After Hallister became the manager of the Night of Bliss, there were even noble ladies from isolated Cliff City who traveled thousands of miles to find him. He also heard that there was a woman who caused a huge ruckus at the Night of Bliss and almost got into trouble. Because that woman had deep connections with the Chamber of Commerce of isolated Cliff City, Hollister couldn't use violence. In the end, it was Dwight Steele of the Dragon Singer mercenary group who came out to mediate. It was also for this reason that Han Jin didn't like Hollister and Chi Li being together. Chi Li's personality was too pure, and he was worried that Chi Li would be hurt. In front of the experienced Hollister, Sunir's change couldn't be concealed. "Not at all, sir." Hollister was still smiling, but he lowered his voice and said in a voice that only Han Jin could hear, "But Miss Sunir is too charming today. Sir, you're amazing." "Cut the crap." Han Jin waved his hand with a big smile. Hollister's compliment had scratched Han Jin's itch, so he naturally turned the situation around. For today's welcome banquet, Hollister purposely closed an entire building. For the Holy Crown City, this was a day of celebration. Many people came to attend the banquet, not only the soldiers who had gone to war, but also the generals and middle and lower-level officers of the garrison. The officials of the city hall, the new dignitaries headed by Chief Magistrate Schumann, and the local nobles were all gathered in this building. The atmosphere of the banquet was very lively. Some things could be done by Guevara, Majordomo Gale, and the others, but some things could only be done by Han Jin, such as making a declaration in front of countless eyes. But now there was no need for Han Jin. Guevara, Majordomo Gale, and the others were all experienced in this, so there would be no awkward silence. Sunir could still hold on, so Yelena asked Hollister to find a room for her to rest for more than half an hour before returning to the banquet table. Han Jin finally took the opportunity to sit beside Gao Bin. Gao Bin's table was mostly filled with elves, such as Lydia, Blanche, and Constance. After Han Jin sat down, his eyes first fell on Constance. He smiled and said, "How's your injury?" Constance's expression was a little frightened. The relationship between the two should be that of master and slave. Although Han Jin had never mentioned it, Constance couldn't forget Han Jin's violent methods, so she was afraid, even if it was Han Jin who saved her. She has recovered 70 to 80% of her strength. "Raphael, thank you," Gao Bin said softly. "It's what I should do." Han Jin smiled and poured himself a glass of wine. After hesitating for a moment, he said slowly, "Big brother, come, let me toast you." In fact, when they first met, Han Jin had already called him Big Brother, but Gao Bin didn't care. At this moment, he couldn't be careless anymore. Gao Bin looked at Han Jin quietly and didn't say a word. After a while, he waved his hand and signaled Lydia and the others to leave for now. "This glass of wine, I'll drink it later." Gao Bin gently pressed his palm on the wine glass. His usual playfulness had long disappeared, replaced by a serious and dignified expression. "Raphael, you should know that I hate long-winded people. Heh. I don't expect Sunir to be happy in the future, and I don't care what the elves get. I just want you to do one thing well, something that is within your responsibility." "Say it." Han Jin put down the wine glass and looked at Gao Bin. "Don't let Sunir be wronged." "Can you do it?" Gao Bin asked softly. "How do I put it?" Han Jin smiled. "I cherish Sunir more than I cherish my own life. No matter the situation, I will do my best to not let her be wronged." Gao Bin was silent for a long time, then suddenly laughed. "I asked you to shout a slogan, and you said it was mushy. What you said just now, you're not mushy anymore." Han Jin was angry and amused at the same time. He didn't know how to respond to Gao Bin. "But, I believe in you." Gao Bin patted Han Jin's shoulder hard, then raised his glass and drank it all. Chapter 496. No matter how the welcoming crowd cheered, no matter how grand and lively the banquet was, nothing could distract Han Jin's attention. Even in front of Sunir's tender affection, he would never forget his roots. Strength was everything. Without strength, even if Sunir and Yelena were still willing to marry him, what right did he have to protect that happiness? Therefore, before the banquet ended, Han Jin had already quietly returned to his magic lab. As for the negotiation with Cold Shadow City, he had already left it to Guevara. A magic crystal the size of a washbasin floated silently in the air. Faint white threads scattered from the magic crystal and filled the entire room, causing the magic lab to look like it was covered in a thick fog. Everything was blurry, and even the bright stars were blocked by the fog. However, the fog was a little strange. Within the thick milky white fog, there were countless sparks flying everywhere. Han Jin hovered above the holy crystal. His breathing rate was very fast, almost every 2 seconds, and the range of his breathing was also very large. Every time he inhaled, his body would expand, and every time he exhaled, his chest would collapse inwards. If one could get close to Han Jin, they would notice that the milky white fog floating in the room was disappearing as Han Jin breathed. Of course, the rest of the fog would quickly fill in the blank. From midnight until now, Han Jin had been sitting cross-legged for a total of 6 hours, and he had been maintaining the same breathing rhythm. Suddenly, a light cracking sound was heard, and the magic crystal that was the size of a washbasin had already turned into scattered sand that fluttered on the floor. Han Jin continued to breathe rapidly. After about half an hour, the milky white fog in the magic lab became dimmer and dimmer, and 3 figures slowly appeared from the fog. 2 of the angels remained motionless. They knew what Han Jin was doing, but that was all they knew. The ultimate meaning of this matter could not be formed in their minds. They would only think about it if Han Jin took the initiative to ask them. Lennon quietly looked at the scattered sand on the floor, then glanced at Han Jin with an almost undetectable movement, and lowered his head again. Han Jin finally opened his eyes. First, he moved his shoulders and his fingertips formed a seal. His body disappeared from the air, and then appeared in front of the angels. The next moment, Han Jin bent down, grabbed a bit of sand from the floor, and slowly twisted it in his hand. The spirit-gathering formation was fully activated. In a few days, a huge amount of energy had been extracted from the dragon crystal. Then, he used another 6 or 7 hours to absorb all the energy. Compared to before, this was a huge improvement. However, Han Jin knew that it was still far from enough. His progress was fast, but his opponents were even faster. "You guys clean this place up," Han Jin said as he threw away the sand. Then, his gaze fell on the countless flying sparks. He softly said, "What pure fire elements!" An angel slowly walked forward, and pushed his hands out from his chest. A bubble-like ball of light appeared in his palms. The sand on the floor seemed to have a life of its own. It floated up and was all wrapped up in the ball of light. Then, the ball of light shrank and disappeared into the angel's chest. "This is a good way to clean up," Han Jin calmly said. "Lennon, you used this method to hide the soil, right?" "Master, you." Lennon's body trembled. He didn't dare to lie, but he also didn't dare to admit it. He could only mumble, "Hee, I know how to do that too." Han Jin smiled. His right hand quickly formed an incantation, and then he waved his hand in the air. Countless flying sparks condensed into a point and finally turned into a strange character. It looked like the character Tribulation from another world, but the structure of the character was crooked and didn't seem to be the same. Han Jin quietly observed the character. The character was like the moonlight reflected on the surface of the water. It kept rippling and flashing. When the sparks flew around the room, it seemed very normal. Now that the sparks had condensed, the color emitted had become a bright blue. The angels couldn't help but focus on the character. They could sense a threat. "Master, is this the magic scroll you made?" Lennon asked softly. "You have a thirst for knowledge. Not bad." Han Jin paused. "You can say that, but it's not finished yet. Similar dragon crystals. I need at least 3 more. I didn't expect this." Lennon didn't say anything else. A thirst for knowledge sounded a bit harsh. He knew what Han Jin meant. Why didn't the other 2 angels ask? Han Jin whispered a few words. The rippling character became smaller and smaller, and finally landed in Han Jin's palm. Although the blue sparks disappeared, the character didn't disappear. It was imprinted in the center of Han Jin's palm. "I'll rest for a while and then I'll go out for a walk." "Lennon, come with me," Han Jin said slowly. "Yes, master," Lennon replied in a low voice. The sky was already bright. Summer mornings always came early. Compared to the past, there were much fewer people on the deck. Yelena and Sunir, who rarely drank, were both drunk last night. One was drunk because she was happy, while the other was drunk because she was shy. As for Guevara, who was old but strong, determined, and ambitious, of course, he wasn't affected. He still got up early and went out to deal with government affairs. Strictly speaking, Guevara's power wasn't very outstanding in the Holy Crown City group. However, his position was second only to Han Jin. He had power over government affairs and military affairs. The reason was that no one could win widespread respect without paying a price. Han Jin rested for a while and ate something. Then, he took Lennon and flew away from the god of war until they reached the edge of the city. During the reign of Dismark, the walls of the Holy Crown City were densely packed with magic crystal cannons. Now, almost all of the magic crystal cannons had been moved to the god of war by Han Jin. There were only a few left symbolically, and it seemed a little empty. Alexander was busy with the soldiers. They were erecting stone pillars that were more than 3 meters tall on the city wall. Although Han Jin had only given the order last night, Alexander was a swift and decisive person. Therefore, Han Jin was very confident in leaving the task to Alexander. He didn't even need to set a deadline. Alexander would definitely complete it in the shortest time possible. Seeing the figures of Han Jin and Lennon, Alexander hurriedly walked out from the soldiers and greeted Han Jin. "Sir, you're here." "Well, I'm just looking around." Han Jin glanced around. "Is there any problem?" "It's just that the raw materials are a little difficult to gather. After all, you asked for the entire stone pillar. Such huge stones are very rare, and it's not easy to move them," Alexander said. "How many have you prepared?" "There are about 20 of them." Alexander stepped aside and said with a smile, "Sir, it's best if you take a look at it yourself." "Haha. Your magic runes are very simple, but the arrangement seems to be very complicated. Besides, our mages don't understand it at all." Han Jin followed Alexander and saw a few craftsmen carving next to 2 fallen stone pillars. The magic runes carved on the 2 pillars were exactly the same. The only difference was that one of the pillars had a raised magic rune, while the other one had a concave one. Alexander was right. Han Jin's magic runes were indeed very simple. They were all made up of long horizontal lines or 2 short horizontal lines. The only difference was the arrangement. "Actually, it's not that difficult." Han Jin smiled. "You can think of the long horizontal line as 1, and the short horizontal line as 0, or vice versa. That way you won't get it wrong." "Yes." Alexander suddenly understood. There were 6 lines carved on the top of each stone pillar, which made him dizzy. However, it was much easier to distinguish them with numbers. At least he wouldn't get it wrong. "Lennon, do you know what these stone pillars mean?" Han Jin turned around and asked. "What do they mean?" "The raised ones mean day, and the concave ones mean night," Han Jin said slowly. "In my magic, day is yang and night is yin. Think about it, when day and night merge, what will happen?" "That's impossible." Lennon shook his head. "Nothing is impossible," Han Jin said softly. "Also, I'm asking you, if day and night really merge, what will happen?" I don't know." "They will become the world. Of course, it will be the original world." "The original world?" Lennon asked in surprise. He understood the meaning of the world, but what did the original world mean? "There will be 64 stone pillars during the day and 64 stone pillars during the night. 128 stone pillars will be evenly arranged around the Holy Crown City." Han Jin revealed a smile that Lennon couldn't understand. I call it the yin and yang great expansion killing formation. Lennon not only couldn't understand Han Jin's smile, but also couldn't understand Han Jin's words. He had a lot of questions to ask, but he didn't know where to start. This is a powerful magic formation. I originally wanted to set the magic formation on the god of war. Han Jin continued. Later on, I realized that it wouldn't work. My magic array needed to borrow the power of the heavens and earth, as well as the aura of all living things. The god of war was too small, and it couldn't carry the power of the magic array. The strength of all things. The strength of all things is human beings. Han Jin smiled. I'm satisfied with the scope and population of the Holy Crown City. I believe that the magic formation will succeed. Lennon, do you have a strange feeling? No. Lennon's voice was a little timid. How come? Han Jin laughed. Since you can trigger the Holy Crystal, of course you know the power of the Holy Crystal. Haha. I need the breath of the strength of all things. What is this thing? What's the difference between it and the Holy Crystal? You really don't want to know the answer to these questions? Lennon mumbled, and his wings of light trembled slightly. Do you find that I'm similar to the God of Light or the Archangel Alpha? Han Jin lowered his voice. Lennon had turned into a statue, and his wings of light slowly retracted to the sides of his body. Since you don't want to answer, then forget it. Let's change the topic. Han Jin looked away. In 2 months, I shouldn't have the energy to do anything else. Only then can I complete my magic formation. Lennon, aren't you curious? I've spent so much effort. Who is it that I want to deal with? Who is it? Lennon asked in a difficult voice. Of course, it's the fallen angel Catherine. Lennon lowered his head little by little, and his straight waist bent a little. His reaction gave an illusion that his whole body was shrinking. Lennon, don't you feel it? The fallen angel. Catherine is the representative of evil creatures. We must. Lennon said intermittently. Don't rush to answer. You have 2 months. You can think about it carefully. Han Jin said lightly. To be honest, the seal in your body has been loosened to the extent that even you can feel it. I didn't interfere with you because I wanted to give you a fair chance to think independently. If angels could sweat, then Lennon's cold sweat would have soaked his entire body. He had always been afraid of Han Jin, not only because of the influence of Tao, but also because he clearly knew that Han Jin could take everything away from him with a wave of his hand, including his life. Master. Lennon immediately prostrated himself on the ground, looking like the most devout believer worshipping the god of light. Alexander's soldiers were better off. Most of them were veterans who had been through hundreds of battles, and the new recruits had also undergone Alexander's strict training. No matter what Lennon did, the soldiers were still busy with their work, as if they didn't see anything. However, the craftsmen were different. When they saw an angel of light kneeling down in front of Lennon, they immediately became noisy. Although they were immediately scolded by the soldiers and returned to their work, their eyes still drifted over from time to time. You can go back first. Han Jin said softly. Think about it carefully, then tell me your thoughts. Remember, I'll give you 2 months at most. Understood, Master, Lennon replied softly, then slowly straightened his body and floated into the air. Sir, this angel seems a little different? Alexander whispered as he looked at Lennon's back. You're right, he is indeed different. Han Jin smiled. After chatting with Alexander for a while, Han Jin walked around the city and went to find Guevara. By the time he returned to the god of war, it was already noon, and Miriam had brought the maids with her to deliver lunch to everyone. Only then did Han Jin realize that Sunir and Yelena hadn't woken up yet. He couldn't help but worry. Because he was in a hurry to train, he didn't wait for the banquet to end. God knows how much Sunir and Yelena drank. Leaving his seat, Han Jin quickly walked down the deck. After hesitating for a moment, he walked towards Yelena's room first. When he opened the door, he saw 2 figures wriggling on the bed. Han Jin's heart skipped a beat, then he saw a head of smooth golden hair. Han Jin was relieved. So it was Sunir. As he walked closer, he saw that Yelena was lying on her back, taking up most of the space on the bed, while Sunir was lying on her side. Yelena was indeed drunk and couldn't sleep well. Sometimes she would talk in her sleep, and sometimes she would move her body. Sunir, on the other hand, was motionless. Only when Yelena's hands and feet touched her or she talked in her sleep would she open her eyes slightly, then close them again. Her experience living in the jungle made her instinctively alert, but because she was too sleepy, she couldn't resist. If Yelena was a lazy cat basking in the sun, then Sunir was a cheetah who was alert in her sleep, or a drunken leopard. Han Jin was angry and amused at the same time. After watching for a while, he suddenly had the urge to play a prank. He stepped onto the bed, tiptoed and pushed Yelena to the side, then lay down comfortably in the middle. Yelena's bed was a single bed. Although Han Jin's body wasn't as strong as Morrison's, he was still much bigger than Yelena. He took up half of the space on the bed, and poor Yelena was squeezed to the side of the wall. Perhaps she felt uncomfortable, or perhaps she wasn't satisfied with the dream, but Yelena mumbled something and shook her head vigorously. On one side was a hard wall, and on the other was a flexible body. Yelena, who was in deep sleep, made a reasonable choice. She struggled to turn around and leaned against Han Jin, one of her hands naturally resting on Han Jin's chest. Han Jin closed his eyes, held back his laughter, and waited quietly. He wanted to see how Yelena and Sunir would react when they woke up, but who knew that a wave of tiredness would hit him, and after a moment, he also fell asleep. With Han Jin's current level of advancement, although his physical strength could withstand 6 to 7 hours of high-intensity breathing exercises, the consumption of his spirit and willpower was very great. He was really tired, and this wasn't something that the energy in the dragon crystal could make up for. After an unknown amount of time, Sunir finally woke up from her sleep. She stretched her body, and the seed of flirtatiousness had already taken shape between Sunir's eyebrows. Her lazy posture was extremely charming. The next moment, Sunir felt that something was wrong beside her. She hurriedly opened her eyes and saw Han Jin. She was stunned for a moment, and then her face flushed. What happened last night? The three of them sleeping together. It was really inappropriate. Sunir tried to sit up and quietly leave, only to find that the skirt she didn't take off last night was pressed down by Han Jin. The bed was so narrow that the three of them were tightly squeezed together. Sunir was stunned for a moment, and then sighed helplessly. Forget it, I'll just pretend to sleep. If Han Jin and Yelena woke up, the situation would be even more awkward. At this moment, Yelena's vague voice came from the other side. Sister Sunir, you're too heavy, you're too. Before she could finish, she stopped abruptly. Had Yelena woken up as well? Thinking of this, Sunir closed her eyes tightly. Chapter 497. Shuman strolled on the street. His eyes swept around, never lingering in any place for too long. When he saw beautiful women that made people's eyes light up, he smiled. When he saw poor beggars, he still smiled. The happiest thing in life was to be proud of one's youth. However, the most dangerous thing in life was also to be proud of one's youth. This was because young people had less self-control and were easily complacent. Once they fell, they might not be able to get up again. Shuman understood that glory and danger coexisted. Therefore, he had to remind himself every day to stay out of the limelight as much as possible. However, most of the time, it was not up to him to make the decision. Han Jin trusted him, and liked to call out his name when he was in trouble. Lang Ning admired him, and their relationship was getting better and better. As the first young general to follow Han Jin, Lang Ning played the role of a wind vane in the army. The other corps commanders had to show some respect to Lang Ning and naturally treated Shuman as one of their own. Shuman did not want to advance too quickly. After all, his foundation was not solid. However, He still became the leader of the local nobles and the representative of the rising nobles. Many people were more excited the higher they climbed, but Schumann was more nervous the higher he climbed. Especially when he knew that Han Jin intended to let him assist Guevara in handling the government affairs, the string in his heart was about to break. It could be said that he was lucky to be promoted by leaps and bounds within a year. However, it was not that he was worried that Han Jin would not trust him, but he was afraid that he would fail to live up to Han Jin's trust. Therefore, Schumann tried his best to squeeze out some time every day to patrol around like before. This was to remind himself not to forget the hard work he had done in the past. Almost a dozen attendants followed behind Schumann. Some of them were his former bodyguards, and some were his playmates when he was young. As the saying goes, the boat rises with the tide. He had gained power, and it was not too much to help his friends. Otherwise, it was very likely that he would fall out with his friends, and then his foundation would be even weaker. When they reached a crossroad, Schumann decided to stop his patrol for the day. He still had to rush back to the city hall to see if Master Guevara had any instructions for him. A capable assistant was not someone who could easily complete the tasks given by Master Guevara. This was far from enough. Instead, as long as Master Guevara was in trouble, the assistant should immediately appear beside Master Guevara without waiting for his summons. Just when Schumann was about to turn around, he saw a carriage galloping towards him from the East Street. The speed of the carriage was restricted in the Holy Crown City. Except for a few people, no one was allowed to gallop freely in the city. But that carriage was very fast. The coachman was whipping the horse and shouting loudly to make the pedestrians and vehicles on both sides of the street move aside. Schumann narrowed her eyes. Who was so arrogant? A moment later, the carriage approached the intersection. Schumann felt that the coachman looked familiar. After pondering for a moment, he immediately reacted. His memory had always been good. If he wasn't wrong, the coachman should have followed Morrison's and Sassu to Depew City to negotiate with City Lord Molishan. Why was he in such a hurry? Did something happen to Morrison's and Sassu? Just then, another carriage pulled by 4 horses came slowly from the South Street. One carriage was fast while the other was slow, but they met at the intersection. There were no traffic lights in the Holy Crown City, and the width of the street was far less than that of the roads in the other world. Although the carriage coming from the South Street was just moving slowly, it was still much faster than the pedestrians walking. When the coachman saw the other carriage rushing towards him, it was already too late to dodge. He could only pull the reins forcefully. The 4 horses were pulled upright. The wheels of the carriage rubbed against the ground for more than 2 meters before they finally stopped. But the coachman of the other carriage obviously didn't know what was going on. He did nothing but watch his own carriage running straight towards the other carriage. Seeing that the 2 carriages were about to crash into each other, the experienced coachman jumped down from the frame of the carriage and grabbed the shaft of the carriage with his backhand. With a low shout, he suddenly pulled back, and the carriage miraculously moved back more than 3 meters, while the 4 horses in front were pulled over and fell to the ground. Only then did the dazed coachman react, urging the horse to dodge to the side. However, the speed of the carriage was too fast, and now there was a sharp turn. Amidst the neighing of the horse, the carriage slowly tilted up, and then crashed to the ground with a bang. It rolled more than 10 meters away before coming to a stop. However, the quality of the carriage seemed to be very good, and even after such a violent movement, it did not fall apart. The coachman's head was bleeding, but he was strong enough to stagger up from the ground and scolded the other coachman, "Damn it! Are you blind?" "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." The scolded coachman came over and tried to help the other coachman. He smiled apologetically. "Brother, are you okay? Who's your brother?" The coachman was furious. He didn't care about wiping the blood on his face. He grabbed the other coachman's chest. "Do you know who I am?" I'll pay. I'm really sorry." The coachman could only continue to nod and bow. The smile on his face became more humble as he tried to defuse the other coachman's anger. I have an urgent military matter. Can you King pay for the delay? The injured coachman didn't buy it. His voice became louder. Schumann's eyes became as sharp as an eagle's. His gaze fell on the street. The stone slabs that had been exposed to wind, sun, frost, and rain actually had two shocking shattered cracks. It had nothing to do with the collision. It was all because of the trampling of the coachman. With one pull, the carriage and the horses were dragged a few meters away. What kind of strength did it take? Schumann knew that he couldn't do it alone. Although this wasn't surprising and wasn't difficult for many professionals, the problem was that the coachman didn't release his chi. He only relied on his physical strength. Schumann lowered his head and pondered for a moment. He walked over with a smile and shouted from afar, "What's going on? What's going on?" The coachman who was shouting turned around and immediately recognized Schumann. His face lit up and he shouted, "Lord Schumann, you have to help me! This guy deliberately blocked my way and startled my horse. Look at this." As he spoke, he felt a little itchy on his face. He wiped his face and found that his palm was covered with scarlet blood. He immediately became angry and turned around to beat the other party. Schumann hurriedly reached out and grabbed the coachman's shoulder and walked to the other side. The coachman was stunned for a moment. He didn't struggle and obediently followed Schumann. "I remember you," Schumann said in a low voice. "Did you follow Morrison's and Sassu to Depew City? You have a good memory, Lord." The coachman forced a smile. "Is there an urgent military matter?" "Yes, Lord. How did you know?" The coachman was surprised. "Idiot! What did I say just now?" Schumann was disdainful in his heart, but he still smiled and said, "Lord has been waiting for news from Morrison's and Sassu. You came back just in time. Don't delay any longer. Go to the city hall immediately. Lord Guevara is there. But, I'll solve the matter here for you. Don't worry, I'll make you satisfied. I'll find you in the evening," Schumann said. No matter what kind of person he was facing, Schumann knew that he should play the role of a tactful person. He shouldn't offend people if he could. Although this guy was just a coachman, what if he had a close relationship with Morrison's and Sassu during the diplomatic mission? If he offended him, wouldn't he also offend Morrison's and Sassu? "Then I'll leave it to you, Lord." The coachman was overjoyed. It was a great thing to have a relationship with Schumann. "Haha, it's my duty. Don't mention it. Go back quickly," Schumann said with a smile. "You're lucky today." The coachman turned around and said fiercely. Then he trotted toward the city hall. Schumann's eyes were fixed on the coachman. He looked him up and down and then circled around the coachman. The coachman kept a humble smile on his face. "Brother, are you from another place? Don't you know the rules of the Holy Crown City?" Schumann said with a smile. At this moment, Schumann heard a slight cough coming from the carriage parked by the street. Then, the curtain of the carriage was gently lifted. Schumann looked sideways and was immediately dumbfounded. He saw a beautiful face. Although half of her face was covered by a black cloak, it still couldn't hide her soul-stirring beauty. She was even more beautiful than Sunir and Yelena. However, the woman's eyes were extremely cold, as if she was not interested in anything in the world. Then, the woman glanced around the street and put down the curtain. At the moment when the curtain was about to be closed, Schumann clearly saw a strand of silver hair falling down from the woman's forehead. "Lord, what rules?" the coachman said with a smile. After waiting for a while, Schumann didn't answer, so the coachman shouted again, "Lord? Lord!" Schumann woke up from a dream. He felt that his back was cold, as if it had been wet. The woman's eyes were like icebergs that had been silent for countless years, which made him feel cold to the bone and even made him unable to breathe. "Lord!" The coachman's eyes were a little uneasy. "Ah!" Schumann finally sobered up completely. He took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Then, he smiled and said, That carriage came from Depew City. You heard it just now. It was an emergency military mission. You injured people, and the horse fell down. As for the carriage, it's ruined. Shouldn't you? Lord, I understand. The coachman smiled and said, I can compensate you. This is not a small amount. Schumann said, otherwise, I won't be able to report to my superiors. The coachman took out a small cloth bag from his arms and handed it to Schumann. Lord, this is all I have. Take a look. Is it enough? Schumann took the small cloth bag, and felt that it was quite heavy. He gently opened it and found that it was full of gold coins, about 20 of them. His smile became even brighter. It's enough. There's still some left. I'll treat you to a drink with the rest. You see, it's my fault for being careless today. I'm sorry to have disturbed you. How embarrassing is that? Schumann scratched his head. It's my duty, it's my duty. The coachman bowed and said, Lord, can I go now? Don't be in such a hurry. Schumann looked around. Inside the carriage it's our Mississippi. Where did you come from? We came from the Freedom Federation. The coachman sighed. Lord, the Freedom Federation has just been attacked by the Abyssal race. I heard that the Holy Crown City is the safest place in this area. Therefore, our Miss decided to hide here for a while. A very wise choice. Schumann patted the coachman's shoulder and felt that the coachman's shoulder muscles were extremely strong. Then he smiled and said, Your Miss is very beautiful. Only the two of you? Yes, yes. The coachman's expression became somewhat unnatural again. Brother, are you willing to do me a favor? Schumann asked mysteriously. Lord, if I can help, I will definitely help. Why don't you introduce me to your miss? Schumann winked, thinking that he was being witty. The coachman's facial muscles suddenly became stiff. Blue veins popped out on the back of his hand and forearm, but Schumann couldn't see anything. He just smiled and stared at the coachman's eyes. Lord, I'm afraid it's not possible. The coachman said with difficulty, lowering his head, Our miss has a very strange temper. Besides, I'm just a coachman. It's not my turn to do this kind of thing. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Schumann said unhappily, Your miss only brought you to the Holy Crown City, which proves that she still trusts you. Moreover, to be frank, my name is Schumann, and I'm the chief magistrate of this city. Do you understand what I mean? The coachman's expression kept changing. Schumann had already made his attitude clear. If you are obedient, you will naturally get benefits. If you are disobedient, as the chief magistrate, I will make things difficult for you, and you will definitely suffer. Since you came from the Freedom Federation, you still don't have a place to live, right? Schumann said with a smile, Let's go. Can you go to my house? My house is very spacious. I can arrange for you master and servant to live there. No, no, Lord. The coachman hurriedly waved his hand. We have friends here. So it's like this. Schumann pondered for a moment. Then let my people escort you for a while. Before that, I have to talk with your Mississippi. We have to be polite, don't we? With that, Schumann walked towards the carriage with a smile. Lord. The coachman hurriedly stopped in front of Schumann. What he wanted to do most was to tear Schumann in half with his hand. Unfortunately, the Holy Crown City was not an ordinary city. If there was any disturbance, the god of war and Han Jin would definitely be alarmed. Therefore, although his chest was about to explode, his tones sounded like he was pleading, Please don't, Lord. Our miss has just escaped from the Freedom Federation and is in a very bad mood. If you are so abrupt, she will definitely be angry. Lord, if you really want to get to know our miss, please give me a few days. I beg you, Lord. What you said is reasonable. Schumann hesitated for a moment, then seriously asked, How many days? 2 days. Just 2 days. No problem, it's settled. Schumann nodded magnanimously, then turned around and said, You guys, escort this old man to the place he wants to go. Yes, my lord. The attendants responded and walked towards the carriage. The coachman wanted to oppose, but he was afraid of angering Schumann. He could only reluctantly follow behind, while secretly praying that the person in the carriage would not lose her temper. Otherwise, everything would be irreparable. Watching the carriage go away, Schumann turned around and walked towards the city hall with a smile. Schumann, this is not your style. One of the attendants laughed. What's wrong? Are you tempted? Don't say that, that woman is really too beautiful. The other follower also joined in the commotion. From their tone, one could tell that although they were now Schumann's followers, they must have been friends in the past. You know nothing. Schumann sneered. That woman's origin is not simple. You're right, Lord. That woman's temperament is too arrogant, which can't be cultivated by an ordinary family. Arrogant? Oh, that's indifference, indifference that doesn't care about anything. Schumann shook his head. I'm sure that woman is a very terrible professional. Professional? What do they want to do in the Holy Crown City? Don't tell me they want to challenge Lord Raphael. One of the attendants laughed. Schumann's attendants burst into laughter together. Challenge their lord? That was a very absurd joke. What do they want to do? Wait and you'll know. Schumann said slowly. The coachman asked me to give him 2 days, which means they can finish what they want to do in 2 days. Lord, should we report to the Lord? One of the attendants whispered. Are you stupid? Schumann said impatiently. If you have to report such a small matter to the Lord, then what's the point of keeping you? But, Lord, you said that woman is a very terrible professional. What if she, yes. Schumann also had a headache. Although his current status was very noble, he did not have many powerful professionals under him. Who could he ask for help? Lang Ning? Lang Ning had reached the point of rigidity in terms of military discipline. It was not easy to mobilize soldiers, and he had to get permission from Han Jin. After thinking about it, Schumann thought of Gibran. The two of them had a good relationship, and if Gibran agreed to help, then Julia would also help. With the help of these two strong professionals, there should not be any problems. I won't go to the city hall for now. Schumann stood still. You guys go there for me. If Mr. Guevara needs anything, inform me immediately. Lord, where are you going? One of the attendants asked. I'm going to the God of War to find Gibran, Schumann said. Oh right, without my orders, do not act on your own, understand? You must not disturb that woman. Chapter 498. They are gone. The coachman looked back and saw Schumann's followers walking away. He breathed a sigh of relief. Who are they? An old man with a white beard asked in a low voice. They are the followers of Schumann, the chief magistrate of the Holy Crown City. By the way, is there such a person? How did you provoke him? The old man showed a shocked look. We didn't provoke him. The coachman glanced at the carriage and wisely changed the topic. Is he very powerful? He is Raphael's loyal lackey. Qian Ning and the others were killed by him. The old man's cheeks slightly trembled. No, it's not safe here. After saying that, the old man turned around and was about to leave. What are you going to do? The coachman hurriedly pulled the old man's arm. Pack up, we have to change a place immediately. Don't worry. The coachman smiled. It will only take 2 days for you to witness a shocking event with your own eyes. Then, I will take you and leave. Heh. Don't look at me like that. Others are afraid of Raphael, but we are not. The coachman said while glancing at the carriage, hinting to his companions that he had brought an important person who could compete with the Lord of the Holy Crown City, Raphael. Leave? Yes. The coachman paused. Why are you hiding in such a place? Why not go to the Black Pearl Hotel? That place has been monitored by Raphael's people. The old man smiled bitterly. I will listen to you. Follow me. Under the guidance of the old man, the carriage slowly drove into a large storehouse. However, this storehouse was empty, and because it had been in disrepair for a long time, The walls of the storehouse were covered with ivy, completely blocking the view of the walls. The old man walked to a wall and reached out to push it. The ivy neatly opened inwards. It turned out that there was a door inside. The door was barely wide enough for a carriage to pass through. The coachman carefully drove the horse in. Behind the door was an alley leading to a small courtyard. The old man carefully closed the door and quickly caught up with the carriage. As soon as the carriage entered the courtyard, a beautiful female magician in her 20s hurriedly opened the door and rushed outside. She stared at the carriage with a pair of enchanting eyes. The door of the carriage was pushed open, and two figures covered in black cloaks slowly walked out of the carriage. Although they were wearing the same clothes, there was a huge difference in their stature. The one walking in front was slightly petite, while the one behind was thin and tall. The female magician was about to exclaim, but the next moment, the two figures coming out of the carriage were completely different from the ones in her impression. "Eva, are you all right?" The tall and thin man behind him sighed. His tone sounded very complicated, filled with too many emotions. "Brother!" Eva cried out in grief and rushed into the man's arms. "I heard from a friend that you were in the city when Raphael used the volcano to destroy the underground city. I thought..." Mantico's voice began to tremble. "Do you still remember Makaf and David? They were hiding by Kutini's side. When Kutini went to see Raphael, they knew that Raphael would definitely take Kutini's suggestion, so they warned me. What about them? I must express my gratitude in person," Mantico said. "They were already killed by Raphael," Eva said in a low voice. "Raphael. Raphael. Why do I keep hearing that disgusting name?" Mantico said through gritted teeth. "Eva, are you saying that you already knew about Raphael's plan?" the coachman suddenly asked. "Then why didn't you warn Alquit? What does Alquit have to do with me?" Eva's face turned cold. Also, if Alquit had taken precautions, wouldn't that be telling Kutini that he has a spy by his side? But the coachman wanted to argue, but he knew that now wasn't the time to do so, so he shut his mouth. "Brother, how did you become like this?" After her excitement, Eva finally realized that Mantico's body had become hard and stiff, without any of its usual softness. The ridiculously large cloak almost covered Mantico's entire head, leaving only a bit of his chin exposed. His chin was a pale white that shouldn't be the color of his skin. Whenever she talked to Mantico, he would turn his face to the side to avoid making eye contact with her. "I'll tell you about me later." Mantico gently pushed Eva away and took a few steps forward. "My lady, you..." The figure in front of him ignored Mantico. She looked around and walked into the room, closing the door behind her. "Brother, who is she? Why is she so arrogant?" Eva whispered. "Keep your voice down." Mantico's voice almost went out of tune. He suddenly reached out with his right hand and covered Eva's mouth. "She's a very powerful being, do you know that? Can we..." "Eva, what's wrong with you?" Before, Mantico's hands had been hidden in his long sleeves. In a moment of desperation, he tried to cover Eva's mouth, but that clearly defined part of his body was exposed in front of Eva. Eva had already understood what her dear brother had become. Her body was on the verge of collapsing as tears streamed down her face. "Eva, don't be like this. You should be happy," Mantico said bitterly. "If Teacher Denver hadn't saved me, we wouldn't have the chance to meet again. Brother, I know. I'm not unhappy, and I don't dislike you." Eva sighed and threw herself into Mantico's arms again, but she hugged him even tighter. No matter what Mantico had become, he would always be her brother. "Mantico, now's not the time to talk about your relationship with your sister," the coachman said. "We need to hurry." Sigh, how could Her Excellency lift the curtain and let others see her? Although he was complaining, his voice had become so low that it was almost inaudible. "I know it's wrong, but who's going to tell Her Excellency? You or me?" Mantico's voice was full of helplessness. "Brother, who is she?" Eva asked. You still haven't figured it out? Haha. She's the fallen angel, Lady Catherine. What? Eva was shocked. She paused for a moment, then whispered, Yesterday, there was a huge gathering in the Holy Crown City, and it was said that Raphael defeated Lady Catherine? Yes. Speaking of this, Mantico felt even more helpless. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that the fallen angel Catherine would lose, and in such an inexplicable way. She's injured? Then why did she come to the Holy Crown City? It's dangerous. It's because Lady Catherine was injured that Raphael would never expect Her Excellency to sneak into the Holy Crown City at this time, the coachman said. ****** on the god of war, Han Jin, the subject of countless people's thoughts, finally opened his eyes. He was awakened because he could clearly feel a series of slight vibrations. Sunir and Yelena were still asleep. Han Jin looked at one and then at the other, then suddenly laughed. All right, stop pretending to be asleep, get up. Sunir and Yelena were still in a deep sleep. Regardless of whether their acting skills were good or not, their bodies had already betrayed them. Gugugugu gugugugu, gugugugu. The low sounds continued, and this was the source of the vibrations that Han Jin felt. Sunir and Yelena were drunk and had slept until now. When Han Jin entered the room, it was already noon, and it should be almost dusk. They had not eaten for a long time and were starving. Han Jin saw that Sunir and Yelena were still pretending to be asleep and couldn't help but laugh. Are you two singing a duet? But your singing is too bad. Sunir knew that she couldn't pretend anymore, so she simply opened her eyes and said angrily, It's all your fault. Why are you here? I was just joking with you, but I didn't expect that I would fall asleep. Han Jin saw that Yelena still didn't move, so he stretched out his hand and pinched her nose. Get up. What are you doing? Yelena pushed away Han Jin's hand and then lazily rubbed her sleepy eyes. Finally, she lifted her eyelids little by little and saw Han Jin and Sunir. She was shocked. Why are you here? Yelena, I have a suggestion for you. Do you want to hear it? Seeing Yelena's expression, Sunir suddenly felt much more relaxed. She was not the most humiliated one, and there was someone else to cover for her. What suggestion? Yelena asked. In the future, if you want to deceive people, you should first train with Morrisons. If you can deceive Morrisons, then go to Leger and Sassu. As for Raphael, he should be your final target. What do you mean? Yelena didn't quite understand. Sunir and Han Jin looked at each other and both of them held back their laughter. They knew that Yelena was shy and didn't want to make it too obvious. Sunir jumped out of bed. Fortunately, she slept in her clothes last night, so she didn't have to tidy up. She sat in front of Yelena's dressing table and simply tidied her hair. Why are you here? Yelena was still muttering. Take your time to think about it. Sunir stood up with a smile. I'm going out to eat, Sai. I'm starving. As soon as she heard that they were going out to eat, Yelena immediately jumped up and shouted, Wait for me, wait for me. After saying that, she also jumped out of bed. She didn't even have time to sit down, so she just bent down and casually tidied herself up in front of the mirror. Then, she chased after Sunir and grabbed Sunir's arm. It didn't take long for the three of them to sit at the table, but not at the same table. For some reason, Sunir and Yelena were on the same side and chased Han Jin away. The attentive Miriam had already prepared food for them and quickly put it on the table. Sunir and Yelena's table manners didn't have the slightest relation to ladylike manners. They could be described as a hurricane sweeping away the clouds. In comparison, Han Jin was very gentlemanly. It wasn't because of the difference in their tolerance for hunger, but because of their Taoist technique. As his realm increased, Han Jin's requirements for ordinary food became more and more indifferent. I'm so full. When the unbearable emptiness became satisfied, Yelena happily leaned back in her chair and sighed. Sunir smiled and pointed at the corner of her lips, indicating that there was something embarrassing there. Yelena immediately came to her senses and wiped away the remaining oil. She looked left and right, and seeing that no one was looking, she smiled and winked at Sunir. At that moment, Harley floated out from below the deck. When he saw Han Jin sitting at the table, he shouted, "Master, where did you go? I've been looking for you for a long time. I went to listen to Sunir and Yelena sing." "What's up?" Han Jin said. "Sing?" Harley sighed in his heart. "Master's life is so happy." Sunir blushed and pretended not to hear, but Yelena couldn't take it lying down. She grabbed a piece of unfinished bread and threw it at Han Jin. Yelena was only a magician, so she couldn't attach her mind to the bread. Although Han Jin was only 7 or 8 meters away from her, the bread still missed its target and hit a mountain warrior's shoulder, rolling onto the deck. Miriam, who had been smiling all this time, saw this scene, and her expression changed. She hurriedly ran over and picked up the bread on the deck. She turned back and said to Yelena, "Miss, this is not good. Do you know how many people have to bend their knees for an insignificant piece of bread? How many people have to endure the cold and heat to work hard? How many people have to run around? How many people have risked their lives?" Miriam thought back to when she was selling flowers in isolated Cliff City. Didn't she work hard every day in exchange for a piece of bread? Her eyes were red, and her voice was getting louder and louder. Stillberg was both angry and anxious. He was angry because Miriam didn't know what was good for her, and anxious because he was worried that Han Jin would be unhappy. She actually started lecturing Yelena. Was Yelena someone she could teach a lesson to? Even if Yelena started a fire here, Han Jin would probably just laugh it off, let alone just throwing a piece of bread. Stillberg knew very well how much Yelena spoiled Han Jin ever since Han Jin had gone through that near-death experience. The surrounding mountain warriors, as well as Harley and Hogan, who had just walked onto the deck, were all dumbfounded. What a big deal! Was it worth it? Miriam was usually very humble and polite. What was wrong with her today? Stillberg looked at Han Jin in horror, only to find that Han Jin had turned his head to the side. He was obviously trying to hold back his laughter, and his shoulders were trembling. Sunir had just taken a bite of the bread. She tried to swallow it, but she couldn't. She tried to laugh, but she was worried that she would spit out the bread. She lowered her head, covered her mouth, and forced herself to endure. Only Yelena was the most pitiful. She sat there in a daze, listening to Miriam's scolding without making a sound. After a moment of excitement, Miriam finally calmed down. Only now did she feel uneasy, and her endless speech came to an abrupt end. She said in a low voice, "Miss Yelena, I was wrong, I'm sorry," Yelena said honestly. Yelena said honestly, "Sister Miriam, please don't be angry. I promise I won't do it again." "No, miss, it was my fault." Miriam felt even more uneasy when she saw Yelena apologize to her in front of everyone. "It was my fault," Yelena said. "How about this? I'll eat it as punishment." Yelena snatched the bread from Miriam's hand. "Don't, miss, it's already dirty." How could Miriam let Yelena eat something dirty? She immediately snatched the bread back. "Let me be the judge." Han Jin laughed. "Miriam is definitely not wrong, but Yelena." At this point, Han Jin couldn't help but laugh out loud. Yelena was once again angry. Because of Han Jin, she had been hungry for half a day. Because of Han Jin, she had been scolded. Now, Han Jin was laughing at her. How could she take it? Yelena subconsciously touched the plate, but when she looked at the bread in Miriam's hand, she couldn't help but feel discouraged. An exquisitely made plate was definitely more expensive than the bread, so she should just forget about it. Hearing Han Jin speak, Miriam's expression finally improved. Stillberg moved behind Han Jin and whispered, "Young master, Miriam is too much. I'll definitely teach her a lesson later. She's a good housekeeper. Only when you've experienced hardship will you know how precious happiness is. With her taking care of you, I'm relieved." Han Jin smiled. "Stillberg, have you noticed that Miriam's temper seems to be much worse than before?" Stillberg was a little confused. From the beginning, Han Jin didn't seem to care about what had just happened, but from the latter part, it was obvious that there was a hidden meaning. Young master, Han Jin looked up at Stillberg and sighed. You are too careless. In the past, he would have needed to listen to Miriam's pulse to determine the changes in her condition, but now he didn't have to do so. Me? Stillberg scratched his head and tried hard to reflect on himself. Tell Miriam to rest more in the future. Han Jin paused. I'll leave this matter to you. Pick a few diligent maids and have them help you. Young master, don't tell me you hate Miriam. Stillberg felt his heart skip a beat. Idiot, you'll understand in a few days. Han Jin said helplessly, then changed the topic. Harley, come here. What do you want from me? He had seen the changes in Miriam through aura observation. Perhaps even Miriam herself didn't know about it. He felt a little strange for him to be the first to point it out. He decided to wait a few days for Stillberg and Miriam to understand. Master, those vampires have been taken care of, Harley said. Hogan, hurry up and report what those vampires told you to master. Hogan glanced at Harley from behind. He couldn't be bothered to lower himself to Harley's level. If he took Harley too seriously, Harley would be happy. If he didn't take Harley seriously, Harley would still be happy. There was nothing Hogan could do about this kind of monster. That was why whenever Harley acted like a tyrant in front of him, Hogan would turn a blind eye and turn a deaf ear. Master, it's all here. Hogan placed a roll of paper in front of Han Jin. Han Jin gently picked up the roll of paper, slowly flipping through it as he ate. Chapter 500. The crowd gathered in the Holy Crown City gradually dispersed. The atmosphere had just quieted down, but in the blink of an eye, it became lively again. This was because there was a message from the City Hall that Lord Raphael was preparing for his wedding. Wedding had always been an important event in life, and a lord's wedding was naturally the most important event. However, the specific date had not been set. Gaobin had said that he was in the Holy Crown City, while Grand Duke Solomon was in the capital of elements, thousands of miles away. His only daughter was about to get married, and Solomon would definitely bring Lady Tiffany to attend the wedding. It sounded simple, but there were too many things that needed to be coordinated. What was more complicated was that there was a unique custom here. If one wanted to marry Sunir and Yelena, he had to make a formal request to Gaobin and Grand Duke Solomon respectively, and get the approval of their parents. Although it was already set in stone, the procedure was indispensable. This day, Yelena dragged Sunir to go shopping early in the morning. Knowing that the wedding had been put on Han Jin's schedule, she was the most excited person. Sunir knew that she should at least pretend to be calm, but Yelena did not care so much. Besides, she believed that it was right to show her inner joy and happiness. She wanted to go shopping with Sunir yesterday, but because of the hangover, she slept until the afternoon. Today, she could not delay her business anymore. Yelena and Sunir, who were getting along with each other, walked hand in hand from shop to shop. If Han Jin could accompany them, they would be very happy. It turned out that no love could be perfect. What Han Jin could give them was something that ordinary men could not have, but they would also lose some of the fun in life. It was hard to imagine that Han Jin, who had to push government and military affairs to others, would accompany them to shop. Therefore, Yelena and Sunir were very wise and did not invite Han Jin at all. In a clothing store, Yelena took a fancy to a white gauze. She kept gesturing in front of her coat mirror, imagining how she would look if she wore a wedding dress made of this material. The Holy Crown City was relatively rich, but the material level of the whole continent was relatively poor, so it was impossible to have a variety of ready-made clothes. Under normal circumstances, she would choose the material herself, and then let the tailor in the store sew it. Sunir stood in front of the window, smiling at Yelena who was showing off. Maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe it was a kind of luck, but Sunir and Yelena's personalities were completely different. This was the prerequisite for them to be harmonious. Yelena's, of course. And Yelena's words. Can I? Yelena was a little uncertain. Our Yelena looks good in anything. Sunir smiled. Hee. Yelena put the gauze back on the table proudly. Sister Sunir, have you thought about it? What do you want to wear on the wedding day? It's still early, Sunir said. Han Jin's proposal letter had been sent out, but Solomon's reply had not arrived yet. The wedding would be held in a few months at the earliest. After all, it was too far away. Time flies, Yelena said. You have to be prepared first. I'm not as impatient as you. Sunir smiled and looked away. Suddenly, she saw a familiar figure. She hurriedly looked out of the window. Sister Sunir, what do you see? It's Gibran and Julia. What are they doing there sneakily? Sunir showed a suspicious look. Where? Yelena was curious. She moved closer to Sunir and looked for a moment. Then she shouted, Look over there, it's Schumann. Maybe there's something special going on. Sunir said. She knew that Schumann was almost half an intelligence officer. In the past, the work of dealing with the purple flower of hell was done by him and Chipango. ****. Are we just going to wait for 2 days? Gibran frowned impatiently. Schumann, have you found out their background? I've investigated. The person who lives here is an old guy. He rarely goes out and doesn't seem to have any relatives. His family doesn't hire any servants. It's a bit unreasonable for him to live in such a big house alone. Schumann said, I've also investigated his neighbors and the people living behind him. There's nothing unusual. As for the woman from the Freedom Federation, I can't do anything about it. Your people didn't go in to investigate? It's daytime now, Schumann said. Besides, there are at least 2 high-level professionals inside. My people can't do anything about it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked you for help. If they really are from the Freedom Federation and don't have any bad intentions towards us, wouldn't we be wasting our time? Julia said. It's okay to waste some time, Gibran said. We won't lose anything if we figure out that it's a misunderstanding. If they are enemies and we don't pay attention to them because of laziness or other reasons, that would be a fatal mistake. You're absolutely right. Schumann smiled and said, Before His Excellency went to war, he talked to me once. He was going to learn some experience from Major Domo Gale, and then form his own spy team. As for the choice of spy leader, His Excellency should want to choose between 2 people. Who? One is Chipango, and the other is you. Schumann said. His Excellency wants you to take on the responsibility, but he's worried that putting these things on your shoulders will affect your relationship with Julia. Speaking of this, I have another question. Gibran, is His Excellency going to hold a wedding? Do you and Julia have any thoughts about it? Although Schumann was young, he wasn't an ordinary 2nd or 3rd generation noble. He was very good at reading people's minds. Han Jin didn't talk to him about this to ask for his opinion, but to signal him to pass the message to Gibran and let him make his own decision. So, after completing the mission, he immediately changed the topic. Gibran looked at Julia and said hesitantly, We originally planned to hold a wedding soon, but we didn't tell anyone. Now we can only postpone it. Schumann immediately understood Gibran's difficulties. Han Jin was preparing for a wedding, and then Gibran suddenly announced his marriage to Julia. It would give people the feeling that he wanted to steal the limelight. Gibran and Julia were both reasonable people. They knew that this kind of thing couldn't be sloppy. Even if Han Jin and Sunir didn't care, it would still be easy to be criticized. Schumann thought for a moment and said with a smile, You can hold a secret wedding in secret, and then do whatever you need to do. You can make up for it in public later. If you are tight on money, tell me. This thing is not used to scare people. After saying that, Schumann patted the Viscount medal on his chest, showing that he was a rich noble. What do you mean do what you need to do? Julia blushed. You men are all bad. Can't we talk about something else? What kind of person do you take me for? Gibran glanced at Schumann with disdain. Schumann saw Gibran's confident expression and thought to himself, You brat, don't tell me you've already done it? If Julia wasn't here, he definitely wouldn't give Gibran any face, but now was not the time to talk nonsense. Okay, let's talk about something else. Schumann's expression suddenly froze. That woman seems to be walking inside. Which one? Gibran turned his head to look, and his expression changed drastically. He grabbed Julia and shrank into the corner. Schumann was a little surprised, but he still maintained his calm expression. He waited for a moment, then slowly walked toward Gibran and Julia as if nothing had happened. The three people's attention was attracted, and no one noticed that Sunir and Yelena were looking at them from the window on the second floor opposite them. Gibran, what's wrong? Julia asked in a low voice. It's Eva. Gibran's eyes flashed coldly. Eva? She's not dead. Julia was shocked. Who is Eva? Schumann asked in a low voice. The woman you saw just now. You know her? Of course, she's an old friend. Gibran sneered. Schumann could see that Gibran hated that woman, but this was related to his next move, so he had to get a clear answer. Schumann asked in a low voice, Is she an enemy? That was a few years ago. If it wasn't for Chipango, we might have been killed long ago, Gibran said. She's a mercenary? Schumann knew that Gibran and Julia were both members of the Red Vanguards. She's from the Abyss mercenary group. Gibran nodded. Her brother is Mantico, the leader of the Abyss mercenary group. The Abyss mercenary group? Schumann was stunned, then smiled sarcastically. Even if they all came from the Abyss world, they shouldn't be called that, right? They're too arrogant. Aren't they afraid of becoming the common enemy of all mercenaries? You haven't been to isolated Cliff City, so you don't understand the situation there. Mercenaries have a lot of freedom, and the Mercenary Association's job is to maintain the rules that they have to follow. As long as they don't break the rules, no one will interfere with the mercenaries' freedom. Forget the Abyss mercenary group, they could even call themselves Kill All Humans. In fact, such a mercenary group existed in the past, but they only had 2 orcs. From the beginning to the end, there were only 2 orcs, Gibran said. Mantico is indeed arrogant, but his strength gives him the right to be arrogant. He's very strong? How does he compare to you, sir? Schumann's expression changed. Gibran and Julia looked at each other and saw the exclamation in each other's eyes. Some things, just a little comparison was enough to give a strong impact. A few years ago, Mantico was their number 1 enemy, but what about now? Han Jin's growth was too fast. If Mantico appeared in front of Raphael right now, haha. Maybe Raphael wouldn't be bothered to deal with him himself. Julia smiled. Let's not talk about him. He's worthless. Mantico was already killed by Major Domo Gale. That woman called Eva has already gone in, Schumann said softly. So, they're definitely our enemies? Definitely. Now that we've confirmed their identities, things are much easier. I originally wanted to observe them first so that I wouldn't offend them. Schumann chuckled. But now it's time to draw in the net. Gibran, you guys wait for me here. I'll go report this to my master. Okay, hurry up, Gibran said. Schumann turned around and was about to leave when he suddenly heard a crisp voice. Gibran, Julia, what are you 2 doing hiding here? Schumann turned around and saw Sunir and Yelena walking over hand in hand. He hurriedly smiled. Miss Sunir, Miss Yelena, why are you here? Answer my question first. Yelena looked around carefully and asked curiously, Is there a mission? Gibran paused and said slowly, Guess who I just saw? It's our old friend. Who? Yelena asked. Eva. Gibran said. Do you remember her? Eva. Yelena hesitated. The Abyss mercenary group? That's right. Raphael said that she's dead, right? Sunir didn't believe him. Maybe it's just a resemblance. I've never doubted my eyes, Gibran said. Is it really her? Sunir said. Even if she's still alive, why would she come here knowing that the Holy Crown City is Raphael's territory? She's not here to visit friends and family. Gibran sneered. We'll know once we catch her. No, they seem to be running away, Schumann suddenly said. The door was already open, and a horse-drawn carriage drove out and stopped at the entrance. Eva and an old man were hugging bags of various sizes and throwing them into the carriage. It was obvious that they were preparing for a long journey. Sure enough, it's Eva. Sunir also saw the woman clearly. Schumann, go back to the god of war immediately and tell Raphael to come here, Gibran said. Sunir, should we? An old friend is leaving, of course we have to see her off. Sunir smiled. Sunir's decision was exactly what Gibran wanted. A magus and a great elf, who had activated the Mark of God, would have no problem dealing with Eva and her friend. Julia. Gibran looked at Julia. He wanted to hear her opinion again. Listen to Sunir. Julia said. That old man is also one of Eva's companions? Sunir asked. Yes. Schumann hurriedly replied. Is there anyone else? Sunir asked. There should be a woman and a coachman. They are both professionals. I can't see through the coachman, but the woman is definitely very powerful. Schumann said. Very powerful? Woman? Sunir frowned. Yes, I purposely asked them. They said they escaped from the Freedom Federation to escape the war. Although Schumann didn't believe the other party's excuse, he said the truth. It had the opposite effect because he misled Sunir and the others. That woman is very beautiful, very, very beautiful, and she has a kind of... Schumann wanted to continue, but Eva did not give him the chance to continue. She entered the carriage with the old man, and the carriage started to move slowly. Schumann, let's do as we agreed. Go back and inform Raphael immediately. Gibran said, let's go. The carriage only moved about 20 meters before it had to stop. Yelena floated above the street, and the magic staff in her hand was already pointed at the carriage. Miss, what are you doing? The strong coachman slowly put down his whip. Eva, we've all known each other for a while. It's rude to leave in such a hurry. Gibran appeared on the left side of the carriage with a gloomy face and spoke in a strange tone. Then, Sunir and Julia also surrounded the carriage. The pedestrians saw the tense situation and hurriedly retreated. However, they didn't run away and stayed in what they thought was a safe place to watch the show. The carriage door was slowly pushed open, and Eva's face appeared. At first, she was confused, then shocked, and then frightened. She immediately released a magic scroll and disappeared from her original position. She reappeared in the door that hadn't been closed yet and disappeared in a flash. After all, Eva was a great magician. She could rely on herself to release a teleportation spell. The magic scroll could only buy her a second at most. She didn't want to give up even that tiny second, which was enough to show how nervous she was. However, Sunir and the others couldn't see that Eva, who was sprinting in the courtyard, had a sinister smile on her face. Was it really okay to do this? Unfortunately, the development of the situation was no longer up to her. The big shot that they couldn't afford to offend didn't even want to wait a day. They had to take action. The coachman jumped down from the carriage and shot backward. Then, an afterimage shot out from the carriage and followed behind the coachman. Julia shouted softly. A green light shot out and chased after the coachman. The coachman didn't even turn his head. He just threw out a black flame with the back of his hand. The flame floated up and landed on the green light. The green light immediately exploded and countless vines grew out from it. However, they were all black vines. As they grew, they were also rapidly rotting. Corrosive touch? Julia was shocked. Her tree demon arrow rarely had a chance to be shot down halfway. It was obvious that the opponent was much stronger than her. Julia then shouted, Everyone be careful. He's an abyss devil. Yelena, sound the alarm. Sunir shouted. The appearance of the abyss devil made her nervous. Although she had already asked Schumann to inform Hanjin, she was still worried. There was a magic alarm on Yelena. Once it was sounded, the entire city would enter the highest state of alert. Even if the enemy was unexpectedly strong, they should be able to hold on until reinforcements arrive. Yelena waved her hand, and a white light pen shot into the sky. Then, it exploded with a boom, forming a condensed cloud that emitted a dazzling light in the sky. Like a conditioned reflex, the magician towers in the city quickly opened one after another. In the blink of an eye, the light curtain of the magic shield had covered the sky. Chapter 501. You've made up your mind in just one day? Hanjin said slowly. Master. Lenin's voice was very low. I don't know what to say. I don't even know what to think, but you should have already made your decision. Otherwise, why would you look for me? I don't want to hurt her. Lenin said hesitantly. Who is she? Hanjin asked even though he already knew the answer. It's Catherine. After saying this name, Lenin's voice suddenly became shrill. I want to protect her. That's right, I must protect her. No matter who it is, if they dare to hurt Catherine, I will definitely. Fallen angel Catherine? Hanjin interrupted Lenin's words, then smiled and said, Interesting. If I remember correctly, you were the one who personally injured Catherine a few days ago. Yes, so. I want to kill myself now. Lenin said strenuously. Master, you can't understand that feeling. Every time I think of the blood that spurted out from her body, I feel as if a needle is constantly stabbing my heart. Once, twice, thrice, continuously stabbing. It's so painful that I'm going crazy. Sometimes I actually want to kill my companions and even want to kill you. Lenin was almost incoherent towards the end. Hanjin was silent for a moment. Has justice brought you so much pain? Do you want to degenerate? No. I want to destroy all evil creatures. Lenin howled, but then his voice became low again. Degenerate? Yes, for Catherine, degenerate. Hanjin quietly observed Lenin. Lenin's body was trembling violently, and his wings of light were trembling as if they were convulsing. Due to the large amplitude, the wings of light were constantly turning into light spots and disappearing without a trace. Even the balance of power could not be maintained. One could imagine how intense the conflict in Lenin's heart was. If Lenin had a personality, he would be on the verge of splitting. I can be honest with you. Hanjin said calmly. You want to protect Catherine. For her, you don't even hesitate to become enemies with anyone. Actually, this is very normal. Why? Lenin's body suddenly stiffened, and then he began to tremble violently. He didn't want to fall, but his master seemed to be looking for a reason for his fall. Because a long time ago, Catherine was your wife. Wife? Lenin could not wrap his head around it. After staying in the battle robe of light for countless years, many things had become strange and distant. He only felt that this term was very familiar, but he could not find a specific definition. Is a wife a companion? You can understand it that way. Hanjin smiled. However, your wife is your closest companion. You can completely entrust your heart and your life to her. For her, you can erupt with infinite courage. For her, you can abandon everything, including your reason and your beliefs. Even if you have to sacrifice yourself for her, you won't hesitate. This is your responsibility and also your happiness. My wife is a companion that will drive me crazy. Lenin asked. Some people say that love itself is a fairy tale that drives people crazy. Hanjin laughed. You're not wrong to think that way. If I still want to protect her, then sooner or later will I fall. I don't know if you will fall, Hanjin said softly. But I know that Catherine fell because of you. What? Lenin became a statue. He did not want to fall. This was his bottom line. However, when he found out that Catherine fell because of him, the impact was extremely strong. It almost made his bottom line collapse. For me, Lenin muttered to himself. Han Jin slowly walked towards the entrance of the magic laboratory and left a sentence. When you are really ready to accept everything in the past, then come and find me. The next moment, just as Han Jin stepped into the corridor, a thunderous sound was transmitted to the god of war. Warning! Sunir and the others had already chased in. However, just as their figures disappeared from the door, wisps of light gray smoke floated up from the ground, completely covering the entire courtyard. Gradually, the smoke became thicker and thicker, and the color turned from light gray to dark black. When the nearby patrols arrived as quickly as they could, all they saw was a huge black hole. They couldn't see anything inside. The patrols didn't dare to rush inside. They could only take the nearby civilians to the side and ask them about the incident in detail. When the important figures arrived, they could immediately report to them. However, when they learned that Lord Raphael's 2 fiancées were trapped in the magic barrier, everyone's expression changed. Sunir was staring at the back of the abyssal demon. Suddenly, her vision blurred, and the scenery changed drastically. The ordinary courtyard wall had become a ferocious bone wall. The wall was completely composed of white skulls, and the countless skulls were not dead. Sunir could clearly see that they were laughing. The stone floor under her feet was also replaced by endless bones. This was not an illusion. The feeling from the soles of her feet told Sunir that she had stepped into a terrifying world. The air was filled with a strange smell. Although she could not smell the stench, she still felt uncomfortable. Sunir had been on the battlefield and had seen a real pile of corpses. The dangerous days had made her accustomed to blood, but now she wanted to vomit and felt dizzy. Sunir hurriedly turned around and saw the figures of Yelena, Gibran, and Julia. She was relieved and shouted, "Retreat! Quickly retreat!" Retreat? Gibran smiled bitterly. Because of his position, he was the last to step into the courtyard. When he noticed the abnormality, he had already tried to retreat. In his impression, he had only taken 2 steps forward, but when he turned around and took 7 or 8 steps, there was still an endless field of bones in front of him. "We can't retreat," Yelena said as she looked around. "This seems to be a magic array. It reminds me of Raphael's." "No, this is not a magic array." A hoarse voice came from afar. "Please forgive my rudeness, haha. Welcome to the abandoned land." As he spoke, the white bones in front of him suddenly rose up, gradually forming a bone platform that was more than 10 meters tall. There were a few figures standing on the bone platform. Eva, who had just fled in panic, the old man, and the Abyss Devil Man were all on it. There were also 2 people whose entire bodies were covered in black cloak. "Yelena, Sunir, I didn't expect to see you here. It's been a long time," the hoarse voice continued. "Who are you?" Sunir gave Yelena a look, and the 2 of them stood side by side. "You don't recognize me?" A tall, thin figure took a few steps forward and gently took off the cloak on his head, revealing an ugly skull. "Then, let me introduce myself again. My name is Mantico." "Mantico?" Sunir and the others were all shocked. Mantico was not very handsome, but he was not bad. How did he become such a monster? "Are you surprised?" Mantico's voice was filled with bone-deep hatred. He did not want to become an undead creature, but it was Han Jin who made him like this, so he had to get revenge. "Mantico, this feeling of being dry is not bad, right?" Sunir said in a mocking tone. "You should have thought of this day when you were always harming others by any means necessary. It's karma. Idiot, how would you know the greatness of the undead?" Mantico sneered. "Greatness?" Sunir shrugged. "You can only lie to yourself. If you were given another chance, would you really want to become an undead creature? You'll be just like me." Mantico chuckled. I promise. However, you will not have any power. In my long life, you will be my only pastime. What a confident man! Gibran snorted. The guy who was beaten to the point of pissing his pants still has the face to stand up and brag? Julia said. Julia, is there something wrong with your eyesight? Sunir laughed. Do you think he's shameless? That's right. Julia was stunned for a moment before asking, are all undead creatures as shameless as him? Of course, Yelena said with a smile. Don't try to stall for time. To me, these tricks are childish. Mantico's tone turned cold. I'll tell you the truth. What you're standing on is not a magic array, but the real abandoned land. When we found Gibran and Julia, we wanted to lure them in. With Raphael's arrogance, he would definitely rush over to save them. But since Sunir and Yelena are here, Raphael has no reason to avoid battle. Do you understand? We're here to deal with Raphael. You? Haha, this is our paradise, but your hell. Did you notice that your mind power is being strongly interfered with? Yelena, Honorable Magus, can you still use magic? A light breeze blew across the plain of bones. Countless skeletons let out a series of whimpers. Sometimes they were shrill, like howls. Sometimes they were low, like soft murmurs. You can try, Yelena said. Sunir and the others were silent. They had all noticed the abnormality. Archers and thieves didn't have high requirements for mind power, but for a mage, mind power was the foundation. They knew that Yelena was just being stubborn. Should we wait for that Raphael to come, or play for a while? The Abyss Devil said with a chuckle. Mantico looked back, but the petite woman in black didn't say a word. He paused, then slowly said, I've always been curious about Raphael's personality. Is his heart too soft or too hard? This is a good opportunity, so don't kill them. I want to torture them bit by bit in front of Raphael. Can he still use his full power? Maybe he'll give up resisting, or even kneel down and beg us. Eva laughed. Chapter 502. Sunir slowly drew back the bow in her hand. The howls echoing over the bone plain also affected her greatly. She didn't know whether she could release the attack or not, but she had to try. No one was willing to wait for death without doing anything. However, Sunir knew one thing, which was something Gaobin had repeatedly warned her about. The most frightening thing about a top-grade or supra-elven archer wasn't how many enemies they could kill with their arrows, but the threat and pressure they posed before they released their arrows. To put it more bluntly, if her longbow was fully drawn and the arrow was about to be released, then all her enemies would be wary. Once the arrow was released, regardless of whether it could kill them or not, she would no longer be a threat, unless she could prepare a second attack in an extremely short amount of time. What should she do? Sunir's heart was in turmoil. If she was alone, she would be much more relaxed, but now her choices could determine the life and death of several of her companions. This was a weight she couldn't bear. Will it work? Mantico saw Sunir's actions. The abandoned land was created by the great Lord Denver himself. For you, I've already used up an extremely precious magic scroll. If I wasn't confident enough, how could I bear to use it? Ha ha! Lord Mantico, the Abyssal Devil suddenly said, I have a small request. What is it? Give her to me. The Abyssal Devil pointed at Yelena. If Yelena had just left the capital of elements, she might have trembled in anger and attacked at all costs. However, she had experienced too much in the past few years. When Sunir looked at her with a worried expression, she saw an unusually calm Yelena. However, Yelena's eyes had become as cold as knives. No problem, we're friends after all. Mantico appeared very generous, then said in a hoarse voice, Honorable powerhouses, before Raphael arrives, you wouldn't mind a prelude, would you? Of course, it would be a heart-wrenching prelude. I can't wait any longer. The Abyssal Devil man let out a strange laugh and suddenly rushed toward Yelena like a bolt of lightning. In fact, the abyssal devil was a species that appeared later. They were very few in number because they were the offspring of dragons who had mastered the ultimate shape-shifting skill and other life forms. In other words, they were hybrids. There were two types of hybrids, the draconids and the demonkin. When the draconids and demonkin were born, their talents and physiques were about the same. However, due to the different education they received, they evolved into two different existences with great differences in status. Although the dragons were powerful, they were few in number. Looking at a few familiar faces for thousands of years was quite boring. That was why the dragons who had just mastered the ultimate shape-shifting technique liked to travel around. The ultimate shape-shifting technique provided them with an excellent disguise. However, there were some things that could not be disguised, such as great strength, arrogance, and so on. They also liked to release their strength. The fear and worship of low-level creatures made them feel satisfied. In this world where the strong were respected, they could easily win many things wherever they went. Romantic encounters were only one of the many things that were not worth mentioning. Their vision covered the entire continent, and they would not stay in one place for too long. Sometimes they would leave after a single moment, and sometimes they would feel bored after half a month or a month. Then, they would start looking for their next target. The children born in this situation were devils, and some of them did not even know who their father was. Even if a dragon really fell in love with an ordinary woman, it would never bring her back to the dragon's habitat, as it would be ridiculed by its companions. A female dragon who went out to travel was much more reserved in this aspect. Although she wouldn't bring back the man she liked, a child was different. The dragon race's pregnancy was very, very long. What kind of feeling would it be to feel a new life in the womb in the endless river of time? It could even be said that the child had become a part of her life, and no one could separate them. She could use the most extreme methods to protect herself and her child without thinking, without any rationality. Dragonborn were born in this situation. They could be taken care of by their mothers as soon as they were born, and they could learn how to strengthen themselves. The best of them could even master dragon language magic, but this was not something their mothers could teach them. Yelena immediately raised her magic staff and released a lightning ball, which hit the abyssal devil's body with great precision. Yelena felt like her head was about to split open after just casting an intermediate spell. This was the result of her forcefully condensing her mental strength. The abyssal devil broke through the lightning ball without any hesitation, allowing the electric arcs to flow all over his body. Devils and Dragonborn were both descendants of dragons. Not only were they extremely strong, but they also had extremely strong physical and magical defenses. The lightning ball could not hurt him at all. Yelena took a step back and raised her magic staff again, but her face suddenly turned pale. Sunir took a deep breath. She wanted to stall for time, but the current situation did not allow her to think too much. She knocked an arrow on the bowstring and pointed it at the abyssal devil from afar. Sunir, your opponent is me. Mantico laughed. With a gesture of his hand, huge waves suddenly appeared on the boundless plain of bones, covering the sky and the earth. Sunir and the others were all swept up by the huge waves and scattered in different directions. Although they tried their best to control their bodies and land steadily, the scene around them had changed drastically. The whole plain began to roar, and millions of skeletons were flying and hovering in all directions, completely blocking their vision. Yelena! Sunir screamed. She could not see anything, and she did not know where to shoot the arrow in her hand. I told you, your opponent is me. You should worry about yourself. Mantico's sinister laughter came from the front. The great Lich Danfo, who had lived for countless years, had painstakingly created this forsaken land in order to become an eternal king. No one could fight against the Lich here, so Mantico was full of confidence. The only thing that could completely destroy this forsaken land was the light of creation. However, The superior angels who could cast this ultimate spell were the Archangel of Authority Alpha and the Archangel of Wisdom Catherine. The former was in the heavens, and the latter was right behind him. What did he have to fear? Yelena forced herself to cast a magic shield and a levitation spell, but then she felt her vision darken. Her mind, which was on the verge of collapse, warned her not to cast any more spells. As soon as her feet touched the ground made of bones, she saw the abyssal devil rush out of the waves of bones without any hindrance and quickly approach her. Yelena's eyes widened. She waved her magic staff again, but nothing happened. As a senior magus, she did not know how long it had been since she had failed a spell. She could not help but stand there in a daze. When the abyssal devil was less than 2 meters away, Yelena finally came to her senses. She swung her magic staff with all her might and smashed it at the devil's head. The abyssal demon was much faster than Yelena. He gently stretched out his left hand, grabbed Yelena's magic staff, and punched forward with his right fist. Yelena's magic shield collapsed in an instant, and then the abyssal demon's fist landed on Yelena's chest and abdomen. The heavy blow made Yelena's body curl up like a shrimp, and large beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. The abyssal devil raised his left hand and dragged Yelena up. He laughed strangely. "Does it hurt? But I didn't use any strength." There was no anger in Yelena's eyes, only indifference and a bit of unwillingness. She was a magus, but she was unable to release her combat power. Anyone would be unsatisfied. The next moment, Yelena felt a sharp pain in her hand. The abyssal devil was slowly twisting her wrist backward, so much so that the back of her hand was almost touching his upper arm. "Does it hurt now?" The abyssal devil was still laughing strangely. "If it hurts, why don't you shout?" Yelena gritted her teeth. Her body was trembling slightly, but she didn't make any sound. She knew that Sunir and the others were fighting with the enemy. Meaningless shouts would only make her companions panic. She would rather die quietly than be a burden to others. A trace of blood slowly seeped out from the corner of Yelena's mouth. Seeing that Yelena was not cooperating, the abyssal devil shook his head and sighed. "What a strong little girl! Haha, what a beautiful face, what delicate little hands!" As soon as he finished speaking, there was a slight sound of bones cracking, and the back of Yelena's hand finally touched her arm. Yelena was in so much pain that she almost fainted, but she still tried to stare coldly at the devil. "Okay." Seeing that Yelena was not making a sound, the abyssal devil looked helpless. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you for the time being. When Raphael appears, we still have a lot of things to do. For now, you'd better rest." Yelena's heart stopped beating at that moment. She understood how vicious the devil was. When Han Jin appeared, whether he hurt or humiliated her in front of Han Jin, it would be enough to make Han Jin panic. She also understood that Mantico's ultimate goal was Han Jin. Everything he had done before was to completely destroy Han Jin. Yelena felt despair. It was a kind of despair that went deep into her bones, making it hard for her to breathe. She wanted to die, but death had become an extravagant wish for her. Suddenly, a spark of fire appeared in her heart and burned fiercely. The momentum of the flame was so fierce that it seemed like it would burn her body to ashes at any moment. "I'm going to die." Yelena slowly closed her eyes and murmured to herself. "You won't die, I promise." The abyssal devil laughed. "Here, you can't use elements to self-destruct." "But why do I feel like my blood is boiling?" Yelena's eyes reopened and regained their color. However, her expression was very strange, as if she had finally found relief after struggling her whole life, or as if she had finally achieved enlightenment after painstakingly trying to prove her Tao. Chapter 503. The abyssal demon felt an inexplicable sense of nervousness. Out of instinct, he let go of Yelena and quickly retreated. Suddenly, countless bright flames scattered from Yelena's body, like extremely long and thin arrows, piercing through the gloomy world. All the bones near Yelena were instantly crushed, and then turned into ashes. The abyssal demon, as if he had suffered a heavy blow, let out a mournful cry, then put his hands in front of his forehead and sped up his retreat. Yelena's body slowly floated up. What was surprising was that her eyes had mutated at some point. They were full of burning flames. If someone could observe Yelena through the waves of bones, they would find that Yelena's eyes seemed to contain a strange world. The burning flames stretched as far as the eye could see and seemed to be even vaster than the plane of bones under her feet. The next moment, Yelena stretched out her left hand and waved it forward. A huge bolt of lightning shot out from her palm and chased after the retreating abyssal demon. On the bone platform, the man in black, who had been silent all this time, suddenly took off his cloak and stared unblinkingly in front of him. Fallen Angel Catherine had lived in this world for countless years. In terms of knowledge and experience, even Grand Duke Solomon had to concede defeat. However, at this moment, Catherine actually revealed a shocked expression. Because Catherine had never seen this kind of magic before. Lightning magic was generally white, but the huge bolt of lightning released by Yelena subverted the common sense of magic. On the lightning pillar, which was dozens of meters long, there were countless crazily burning tongues of fire. The tongues of fire were of different colors. Some of them were as red as beautiful jade, while others were as blue as the sky. Moreover, there were countless golden sparks flowing in the tongues of fire, forming beautiful streamers of light. If this place was a world of bones, then Yelena's lightning was a sharp blade that could cut open the world. The dazzling colorful light bloomed and lit up the whole world. The abyssal demon was hit by the lightning and was blasted hundreds of meters away like a small stone. He brushed past the bone platform and fell in the distance. However, the abyssal demon's body was indeed very tough. He only rolled a few times on the bone platform before he struggled to stand up. Catherine's gaze shifted to the abyssal demon. Her vision was not affected at all. She could clearly see that the abyssal demon was beyond recognition. The robe on his body was gone, revealing his naked body. One of his feet was bare, and only half of the leather boot on his other foot was left. Moreover, his body was full of charred wounds, and in some places, even bones could be seen. Only the chest area, which was covered with a layer of smooth scales, remained intact. The abyssal demon's eyes had become two empty holes. The flames released by Yelena had seriously damaged his eyes. The huge bolt of lightning after that, it was a fatal blow. He staggered to his feet and then fell to the ground. Then, he staggered to his feet again, but before he could straighten his back, he fell again. Obviously, he was stunned by Yelena's sudden and fierce attack and didn't even realize how serious his injuries were. Yelena's figure flew higher and higher, and the dazzling flames on her body were replaced by real flames. Moreover, the range of the flames became larger and larger, and finally covered an area of nearly 100 meters. As long as the surging waves of bones came close, they would silently turn into ashes. Sunir and the others were surrounded. In comparison, Sunir's situation was the best. Her longbow was drawn into a full moon, and the hexagram on her forehead shone like a diamond. Her hands didn't move, but the longbow emitted a buzzing sound. As long as the flying bones came within 5 meters of Sunir, they would be pushed away by an invisible force. However, she still couldn't catch the enemy's position and didn't have a chance to release an attack. Julia was barely able to protect herself. She released more than a dozen Traiant arrows around her. In the past, she used them to attack her enemies, but now she was using them to protect herself. Clusters of vines condensed into a green barrier that was more than 10 meters thick, shielding her inside. Gibran was the most pitiful. Thieves' ability to protect themselves was not as good as other professions. In the overwhelming wave of bones, Gibran was helpless. He only lasted for a dozen breaths of time before he was buried by the wave of bones. In the place where he originally stood, there was already a 5 to 6 meter tall grave of bones. It was just that the grave wriggled a few times from time to time, which meant that Gibran was still alive. However, as for what kind of miserable situation it was inside, outsiders had no idea. Although Sunir and the others couldn't see each other, Mantico could clearly see the changes in Yelena's body. He hurriedly stopped chanting. At this moment, Sunir didn't seem that important. She couldn't break through the wall of bones anyway. Mantico's attention was all on Yelena in the air, because he felt a sense of danger that he hadn't felt in a long time. Ever since he became Great Wizard Denver's disciple, Mantico had gotten whatever he wanted in the Abyss world and regained his former confidence. Mantico had been preparing this trap for a long time and was confident that it would work. However, when he saw the strange phenomenon happening to Yelena, he felt an inexplicable sense of panic in his heart. Mantico raised his hands high, and the red light in his empty eye sockets pulsed even more violently. The bones flying in the air seemed to have received some kind of order and began to spin rapidly. A moment later, they formed a giant spinning top, and the tip of the top was pointed at Yelena in the air. The giant spinning top rushed towards the thin figure in the air with a tremendous force. Compared to the enormous vortex of bones, Yelena was as small as a candle flickering in the wind, as if she could die in the next moment. What Mantico didn't expect was that Yelena would meet it head-on without dodging. Mantico's plans to chase after Yelena were now useless. Does she want to die? That was the first thought that came to Mantico's mind. Killing Yelena wasn't his original intention, and it wasn't because he was protective of her, but because he always thought that torturing Han Jin's women and friends to death in front of him would be the best way to alleviate the hatred in his heart. However, once the necromancy spell was formed, even Mantico couldn't stop it. After all, he was borrowing the power of Great Lich Denver, not the master of the abandoned land. The flames on Yelena's body seemed to contain a mysterious attribute. Before the tip of the vortex could reach her, it turned into ashes. However, the vortex of bones was so large that it wrapped around Yelena in layers in the blink of an eye, forming a continuously spinning sphere in the air that was dozens of miles wide. Mantico was surprised to find that Yelena, who was in the middle of the pile of bones, was completely unharmed. No matter how hard the bone waves rolled, they couldn't get within 100 meters of her. However, this only surprised Mantico a little. In the abandoned land, Mantico didn't have to worry about magic power consumption. As long as the abandoned land existed, he would have an endless supply of power. In his mind, no matter how miraculous the flames on Yelena's body were, they would burn out one day. No one knew how many bones Great Wizard Denver had used to create the Forsaken Land. Following Mantico's incantation, countless waves of bones appeared in the sky and surged towards Yelena's location like a raging tide. However, the flames that Yelena spat out didn't dissipate. Instead, they turned into a giant fireball that was hundreds of meters wide. From afar, it looked like a giant egg floating in the air. No matter how hard Mantico tried, the bone waves he created couldn't affect the giant egg. Mantico started to panic. The development of the situation was different from what his teacher had said. Yelena was supposed to be the weakest because of the interference with her mental strength. Who knew that she would be so difficult to deal with? My lady. Mantico turned around to look at Catherine. He could only ask her for help. Catherine's face was full of anticipation. She was silently looking at the giant egg, as if she hadn't heard Mantico's words. My lady! Mantico's voice rose a few octaves. Catherine frowned, as if annoyed by the interruption, and then turned to look at Mantico. My lady, if we don't subdue that Yelena now, we'll be in trouble when Raphael gets here. Mantico said anxiously. Trouble? Are you implying that I'm already injured and no longer a match for Raphael? Catherine asked calmly. No, of course you're much stronger than Raphael. Then what are you worried about? Mantico was speechless. If it were anyone else, he would have jumped up and cursed at them, but facing Catherine, he could only bury all his anger deep in his heart. My lady, I think we should subdue them all. That way, we'll have the upper hand, even if. Mantico tried his best to explain. Shoo! Catherine put her index finger in front of her lips and chuckled. Listen, listen. Mantico was stunned. I didn't hear anything. At this moment, a loud and clear chirp suddenly bloomed between heaven and earth. Then, the giant white bone top in the air was crushed by a golden light, and a big bird burning with golden flames broke out of the fire egg. Yelena, who was unconscious, was lying on the back of the fire bird. The fire bird flew at an unimaginable speed. The pure and bright golden flames were especially dazzling in this grayish-white world. Every time it flapped its wings, countless sparkling sparks would fall in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the fire bird had flown more than 1,000 meters away, leaving behind an extremely beautiful belt of light. That's... Mantico was dumbfounded. That's a reborn immortal bird. Be careful, those sparks are deadly. Even I avoid touching them. Catherine's smile was a little strange. Also, Raphael is here. Why does Yelena have an immortal bird on her? Mantico shrieked. Raphael is here? Chapter 504. A purple light suddenly appeared on the gray field and chased after the rampant immortal bird. Among the strong men of the Holy Crown City, Han Jin was the first to arrive at the scene. The dark cave entrance, which looked like the mouth of a monster, could frighten others, but not Han Jin. He rushed in without hesitation. The scroll released by Yelena was an emergency alarm. Once it appeared, the Holy Crown City would enter a state of full combat readiness in the shortest time possible. Only 3 people had the right to release this kind of magic scroll: Yelena, Hogan, and Jedis. Hogan was on the ship, and Han Jin sensed that the magic circle and enchantment of the Holy Crown City were activated before the wizard tower of the Holy Crown City, so it should be Jedis' doing. So there was only one possibility left. Yelena was in danger. Seeing that someone was chasing after it, the immortal bird flapped its wings more rapidly. Its speed was beyond its limit. Not only Han Jin could not catch up with it, but even the superior dragons who had mastered the dragon language magic would be amazed. The immortal bird had turned into a golden lightning and shot into the distance. The bones floating in the air were blown away by the pressure in the air before they could touch the flames emitted by the immortal bird. Sunir, who was trapped by the bone waves, suddenly frowned and turned around quickly, pointing the arrow in her hand to the rear. At this moment, an old man appeared in the bone waves. However, the distance between him and Sunir was still more than 70 meters. Ignoring the arrow that Sunir was about to shoot, the old man screamed and turned around to brandish his dagger. A skull the size of a washbasin appeared behind the old man and fearlessly met the dagger. In the next moment, the old man's dagger pierced through the skull, and his entire arm sank deep into it. However, the skull didn't seem to be affected. It opened its mouth and let out a terrifying laugh. Then, it turned into a black bead and shot forward like lightning, drilling into the old man's eye. The old man screamed, and then his head swelled like a balloon. With a bang, it exploded into countless pieces of flesh and blood. This kind of power. This kind of unbelievable power. Kakik. A maniacal laughter rang out. Come, you little bastards, obey my orders. This is the will of the great Lord Harley. A gigantic skeleton made entirely of smoke rose from the bones. It grew taller and taller until it was almost 100 meters tall. Then, Harley waved his bone staff forcefully. The skeleton's body instantly collapsed, turning into a shockwave that could be seen with the naked eye, sweeping in all directions. A strange scene appeared in front of everyone. Outside the shockwave was a monstrous wave of bones, and inside the shockwave, countless bones fell down, returning to the quiet plane of bones. With the rapid spread of the shock wave, the scale of the wave of bones became smaller and smaller. Those with excellent eyesight could see that the shock wave was made up of wisps of smoke. The bones that were roaring and flying a moment ago immediately became as obedient as a lamb as they came into contact with the smoke. How is this possible? Mantico let out a hoarse roar of anger. Someone was fighting with him for control of the abandoned land. It was unbelievable. Mantico waved his hands with all his might, chanting a difficult spell. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he could not stop the shockwave from spreading. In just a few seconds, the plain near the bone platform had calmed down. However, the shockwave did not seem to want to stop, and continued to spread into the distance. Without the influence of the wave of bones, Sunir could already see Han Jin. She could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. Over the past few years, Han Jin had saved them time and time again. Therefore, as long as she saw that man, Sunir was not afraid of anything. Even if the sky fell and the earth cracked, she believed that Han Jin had the ability to turn the situation around. Julia rushed out of the vines that were riddled with holes. She paused for a moment, and then immediately rushed towards the towering pile of bones. At the same time, she shot a few arrows in succession. Green lights flashed one after another, and immediately clusters of vines grew out of the pile of bones. They kept wriggling, trying their best to push the bones to the side. Han Jin gave up on chasing the undying bird. He really could not catch up. He looked at the undying bird with some reluctance, then shot down diagonally. He suddenly disappeared and reappeared next to Sunir. Ha ha ha! Although Harley could no longer be seen, his laughter grew louder and crazier. I'm the ruler! Ha ha! I'm the real ruler! Han Jin could not be bothered with Harley's sleep-talking. His gaze was locked onto Kathleen. To be honest, he did not have it easy. Although his vital energy had recovered to its peak, and Kathleen was heavily injured a few days ago and should not have recovered yet, he really did not have the confidence to defeat her. Sunir only just realized that the fallen angel Kathleen, who had left a deep impression on everyone, had appeared on the bone platform. Her heart, which had just calmed down, began to beat wildly again. Who are you? Who the hell are you? Mantico suddenly roared hysterically. No one answered because Mantico's question was too stupid. Was he so scared that he could not recognize Han Jin? How can you control the land of the abandoned? Mantico roared again. Who am I? Hale was stunned for a moment before he became even more excited. This kind of thing had never happened before. The enemy would only notice how terrifying his master was and would always overlook how great Hale was. Today, the enemy actually asked for his name. This was something to be proud of. Who am I? Harley roared as loudly as he could. On the boundless plain of bones, countless skeletons began to vibrate at the same time, as if they were responding to Harley. Little guy, perk up your ears and remember, I am the greatest, the most honorable, the most courageous, the most noble. Harley was supposed to finish his sentence in one breath, but he suddenly paused and changed his tone. Lord Raphael's most loyal servant. After that, he sighed deeply. It took him so much effort to come up with so many beautiful adjectives, but they all became Han Jin's titles. Harley seemed to be regretting this. How can you control the land of the abandoned? Mantico yelled. Because I'm stronger than you, ha-ha, or idiot. Harley replied proudly. Bullshit. Mantico flew into a rage, the red light in his eyes flashing wildly. What do you think the land of the abandoned is? You think you can control it just because you want to? Unless the life mark of a lich has been carved into the land of the abandoned, otherwise. Before he could finish, Mantico's voice stopped abruptly. Keep talking. Harley's curiosity was piqued. I know who you are. In the blink of an eye, Mantico miraculously calmed down and said in a hoarse voice, You shameless traitor. Traitor? Say that again, you cur. Harley was furious. He believed that his greatest strength was his loyalty, and that he would never allow anyone to slander him. Therefore, He was willing to abandon his so-called upbringing and swear to defend his innocence. Among the 11 disciples, Lord Denver appreciated you the most. He also gave you the most fertile land of the Forsaken, Judara, but instead of being grateful, you chose to betray him. Nonsense. Mantico had been the one to go berserk, but now it was Harley's turn. My name is Harley. And who the F***ck is that Denver? He admired me? Bah, he's not worthy. To escape Lord Denver's pursuit, not only did you destroy your own body, you even erased your memories. Do you want to start anew? Haha, you don't even know who you are, how pathetic. Mantico sneered. In reality, Mantico thought that he was the most pathetic person right now. Even though he didn't want to be a lich, Denver had given him a lot after he became a new disciple, and he saw hope. But now, he suddenly realized that all his efforts had been for naught, and that he had completely lost control of the land of the abandoned. Clearly, the life mark of the old master was much deeper than his. You motherf***cur. You motherf***cur. Harley was so angry that he couldn't speak properly. At first, he thought that this guy who valued him was worthy of respect, and that he had the spirit of a knight. But now, he wanted nothing more than to tear his opponent to shreds. How dare he use such a vicious method to hurt him? However, on one hand, he needed to continue absorbing the power of the land of the abandoned, and on the other, he was worried that Han Jin would suspect that he killed him. Harley, Han Jin said slowly. Master. Harley defended himself as if he had been electrocuted. Don't listen to his nonsense. I still have my memories. Look, I know how to use necromancy magic, and I know my past. This bastard is trying to sow discord between us. Of course you wouldn't erase all your memories, or you'd be even more of an idiot than you are now, Mantico said in a mocking tone. You're the idiot. Harley was about to go crazy. I don't care about your past, understand? All I know is that you're now called Harley. Han Jin said calmly. I didn't call you to ask you anything. I just want you to help Julia. Julia couldn't wait for the vines to move the bones away bit by bit. She started digging with her hands, and blood was already seeping out of her fingertip. If Harley was about to go crazy from anger, then Julia was truly insane. Understood, Master. Harley seemed to have woken up from a dream. Judging from Mantico's tone, he seemed to be in high spirits. Following his words, Julia used all her strength to move a corner of the pile of bones away, scattering them like flowing water. In the blink of an eye, Gibran, covered in wounds, was revealed. Julia suppressed the urge to cry and hugged Gibran tightly. Gibran was already unconscious. Although the wounds on his body weren't serious, there were too many of them. There were almost 100 wounds of different lengths, and he was covered in blood. If it were any other situation, Julia would have immediately asked Han Jin to heal Gibran's wounds, but she could only endure it now. Now it's our turn. Han Jin's gaze fell on Catherine again, and he issued a challenge. This sentence gave Mantico hope. Yes, he had lost the Forsaken Land, but after Catherine killed Han Jin and all the enemies here, the Forsaken Land would still be his, and he would regain control of the situation. Lady Catherine. Mantico stepped aside, his voice trembling slightly. Chapter 505. The atmosphere became deathly silent as both sides waited in silence. It wasn't a pleasant feeling, because their lives were in the hands of others. If Han Jin won, Sunir and the others would be able to leave this place alive. If Catherine won, Mantico would be able to get his revenge and take back his abandoned land. The purpose of walking the path of the strong was to control one's own fate, but the world was cruel. If you walked high, others might walk even higher. Not to mention that commoners were unable to become their true masters. The same was true for experts. Solomon had almost been struck down by asthma, and Han Jin had done many things against his will. Perhaps only a god could surpass all of them. Catherine gently took off her cloak, revealing her black battle dress. No one could tell if her injuries had healed, or how much she had recovered, but there were still 2 shocking gashes on her chest. Clearly, Catherine's battle dress wasn't something rare. It could also be said that she relied on her own strength to fight, so she didn't bother to repair it. "I lied to you." Catherine smiled. Han Jin frowned slightly. He didn't know what Catherine meant, but he didn't want to ask. However, he was already in a state of readiness. Countless purple dots of light slowly rotated around him. If Catherine made a move, he would immediately release his avatar and activate the divine matrix. Last time, Catherine had used the light of creation to break his matrix. Judging from her tone, it seemed that she wouldn't be able to cast the same spell again. This was his only chance to win. However, could Catherine's words be trusted? Probably 70%. Catherine was a maverick, and her arrogance came from the depths of her soul. Jeds didn't want to lie, but Catherine was too lazy to do so. Mantico looked at Han Jin, and then at Catherine. He was just as confused. What did Catherine mean? "I have to warn you first, the great, honorable, and brave Lord Raphael." Catherine's smile grew wider. "Oh, I didn't miss anything, did I? What do you want to warn me about?" Han Jin asked calmly. He didn't want to entertain Catherine's joke, so he went straight to the point. "Mantico is a new disciple of Denver. If you kill him and take his abandoned land, Denver will be furious." Hearing Catherine's words, Mantico cooperated and let out a hoarse, sinister laugh. "You mean, I have to compromise?" Han Jin smiled. He had a balance in his heart. Originally, he wanted to cooperate with Catherine through Lenin, but now, the balance had tipped to the other side. He had to destroy Catherine. If Yelena was hurt, he wouldn't even let Denver, who rarely left the undead world. He was still young and had unlimited potential. Sometimes, Han Jin was very forgiving, but sometimes, he would become a vindictive villain. The key was to not touch his sore spot. "You don't look like someone who likes to compromise, Catherine." "Over the past few days, I've tried my best to understand your growth, and I've learned a lot. Although most of it is fragmented, it's enough for me. Now that you know me, you should know that this kind of warning is meaningless," Han Jin said slowly. "He wants to hurt me and my friends, so I will destroy him completely. Even if Denver is standing in front of me, I will still say the same thing and do it. Little guy, don't be too arrogant." Catherine shook her head slightly. "Donald, who has the inheritance of the god of death, has never dared to step into the undead world. Do you know why?" "Why?" "Many Abyss Masters think that Denver and his 11 disciples are the ones who support the undead world, but that's not the case," Catherine said softly. Kathleen said softly, "The 11 disciples are merely the managers of the abandoned land. Denver's true power has always been hidden in his canopy of undead and has never been revealed." "Does Denver's power make Donald feel fearful and uneasy?" Han Jin said. He had always wanted to know the secrets of the Abyss world, and since Catherine wanted to take the initiative to tell him, he was happy to go with the flow. "You can't say that," Catherine said. "Donald doesn't step into the undead world because there's no need. For countless years, Denver has always been hiding in his nest and never interfered with the operations of the Abyss world. It's not wise to fight with such a master. Staying away is the best choice. Moreover, Donald doesn't want to extend his hand into the undead world, haha. Of course, he doesn't know where to start. The undead world was created by Denver, and there's no power that can affect his position as the ruler." "Donald has a good neighbor," Han Jin said with a smile. "Maybe, but I don't believe that Denver will remain silent forever. A life always has its own purpose and its own ideals," Catherine said. "Do you know where the power of a master comes from? Diligence? Hard work? It comes from the accumulation of time." Catherine paused. "This is reflected more clearly in Denver. The war on the continent has never stopped. At most, it will be quiet for a few hundred years. It's the same in the Abyss world. Where do the masters who died in the war go? The grave? Or the abandoned land? Denver spent countless years collecting the remains of the masters. A fallen dragon can be turned into a phantom dragon. A sacrifice knight can be turned into a terrifying knight. A dead mage can be turned into a lich. Almost all the remains left behind after the death of life can be used by Denver. Haha! After countless years of accumulation, do you know how powerful this is? Han Jin couldn't smile anymore. After a moment, he said slowly, "Why are you telling me this? The thing that gives Donald the most headaches is your Vatican, and what kind of master is the one that Denver fears the most?" Catherine said softly. Han Jin's face sank bit by bit. Donald was worried about the power of the Vatican, so after learning that Nicholas had destroyed the never-setting Sun Mountains, he immediately started a war. What about Denver? What would he do? When the phantom dragon's wings cover the sky, when the terrifying knight's figure covers the horizon, I smell the scent of the Twilight War. Catherine sighed. Although Denver rejected Donald's invitation, I believe that he will appear. I'm asking, why are you telling me this? Han Jin repeated. I hate the Heaven Realm, I hate this continent, I hate those cold skeletons, and I also hate the Dark Abyss world. I hate everything. Catherine laughed, but then her voice became low again. Except for him, you should know. No other reason? Is it just because you hate everything? Catherine suddenly shut her mouth and turned her gaze to the side. Following her line of sight, she saw Harley's figure slowly emerging from the plains. After a moment of silence, Catherine said, "He's your magic tool?" "He's my friend," Han Jin replied. Harley, who was trying hard to absorb power, almost burst into tears when he heard this. The importance of an enemy was far less important than Han Jin's friend. If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid of interfering with the confrontation between Han Jin and Catherine, he would have cheered loudly. "Did you use the same method to control Lenin?" Catherine smiled. Han Jin didn't answer. He just looked at Catherine quietly. "I understand." Catherine sighed again. "He is the same as you. He has a mysterious power. After seeing him and then seeing you, although I can no longer use the prophecy technique, I have a feeling that the only one who can crush Denver's ambition is you. If Donald and Denver really win, you should be happy," Han Jin said calmly. "I've been in contact with Denver a few times, and he has helped me. By the way, I just said that Denver can use the remains of almost all life except for one. Do you know what it is?" Catherine's thoughts jumped around a lot. One moment she was talking about something, and the next moment she was talking about something. However, Han Jin knew that Catherine wouldn't be aimless. He thought for a moment and asked softly, "What is it?" "An angel." Catherine smiled. "When an angel dies, everything will turn into nothingness. At most, only a light magic crystal will be left." Han Jin frowned. He still didn't understand what Catherine meant. "You still don't understand?" Catherine laughed. "I can bleed. You've seen it with your own eyes, haven't you?" Han Jin was shocked. Was Catherine saying that Denver had been in contact with her with evil intentions, and wanted to turn her into a one-of-a-kind angel? Mantico also understood what Catherine was hinting at. He was so scared that he almost fell to the ground. If this was true, why would Catherine help him? Impossible. Mantico suppressed the fear in his heart and said in a trembling voice, my lady, this is a—" "I lied to you, I told you from the beginning," Catherine said to Mantico with a smile. "You lowly people, you want to use me? Was it because I was too casual in the past that you neglected my identity? I was just too lazy to think about it. I only agreed to help you because I was too bored." "No, my lady, I definitely didn't. I definitely didn't." Mantico shook his head desperately. "I came here to tell you." Catherine ignored Mantico and looked at Han Jin again. "There's still a huge gap between you and me. The gap can be closed, Han Jin said softly. He didn't deny it. With the speed at which you're growing, it's possible, but not now. Catherine smiled. I can make you live in fear all day, and I can also make your life peaceful again. So, maybe we should make a deal. I promise that if you refuse me, you'll regret it in the future. Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper at the end. Are you threatening me? At least this time, I'm here for peace, Catherine said slowly. Because I'm not confident that I can undo your spell. Chapter 506. Lady Catherine. You. Mantico stumbled backwards. He never would have thought that his biggest backer had been toying with him all this time. Completely disheartened, he spoke without thinking. Lord Denver will never let you go. Never. Denver? He can't hurt me. Catherine shook her head. He's always wanted to become a god, but he still doesn't know that immortality isn't eternal. He's been on the wrong path since the beginning. No matter how hard he tries, he won't be able to see that day. With that, Catherine waved her hand. Mantico's body flew into the air like a cannonball, flipped a few times in the air, and landed on the ground. Brother! Eva cried out and jumped off the bone platform, rushing towards Mantico. Mantico's entire body trembled as he curled up in Eva's arms. The strange red light in his eyes flickered. No matter how much Eva called out, he couldn't answer her. I don't care who wins or loses, and I don't care what changes will happen to this continent. Catherine smiled. Raphael, you should know what I want. Now, give me a clear answer. Han Jin was silent for a moment. To be honest, Lenin's memories are coming back. I know. He refuses to hurt me again, Catherine said in a low voice. Otherwise, on that day I need time. At this point, Han Jin felt that there was no need to hide anything. The seal I left behind can be removed at any time, but there's still a very secret seal in Lenin's body. I'm guessing it was left behind by the Archangel of Authority Alpha. Plus, I still haven't decided whether to accept your challenge or return a whole Lenin to you. How long do you need? Catherine asked. 3 days. 3 days? That's a long time. Catherine's expression was a bit blank, as if she didn't know how to spend the next few days. Finally, she said slowly, Okay, I accept. You're not afraid that I'll do something behind your back? Han Jin smiled. It's best if you don't lie to me. Catherine's eyes were overflowing with divine light. You can't bear it. Han Jin smiled and slowly walked forward until he was in front of Eva and Mantico. Eva slowly raised her head and looked at Han Jin with eyes full of hatred. She had given up on resisting, but that didn't mean she had given up. It's time to put an end to this, isn't it? Han Jin said softly. Eva did not answer. Her expression was a little twisted, and the hatred in her eyes grew stronger. Han Jin raised his right fist and punched Han Jin right in the face. This pair of siblings had caused him a lot of trouble, so Han Jin didn't hold back. Blood splattered everywhere, and the enchanting face and the thick hatred that couldn't be dispelled were all reduced to pieces of flesh and blood. Then, Han Jin raised his fist again and smashed it on Mantico's head. With a boom, Mantico's head turned into countless pieces of bone that scattered everywhere. Harley wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't have the courage to stop him. He had already taken control of this abandoned land, and Mantico could totally become a part of his power. Nice. Han Jin narrowed his eyes. Raphael. Sunir called out. Look at Gibran. What's wrong with him? When Han Jin and Catherine were confronting each other, no one dared to say anything for fear of disturbing Han Jin. Now that it seemed like it could be resolved peacefully, everyone let out a sigh of relief. Han Jin released the earth-shrinking spell and appeared next to Julia. After a moment of careful observation, he formed a spell and sent a few rays of white light into Gibran's chest. Then, he said to Julia, It's fine, just some external wounds. Julia looked at Han Jin with a grateful gaze and nodded. Julia's kneeling posture with Gibran in her arms was similar to Mantico and his sisters, but their outcomes were completely different. One couldn't help but sigh at the difference in their fates. A loud cry came from the sky. The immortal bird had flown far away, but it couldn't find a way out, so it turned back. Han Jin frowned and looked at Catherine. "She's fine, just some minor injuries." Catherine smiled. "I think you can see my sincerity. If I really wanted to hurt you, they would have been dead before you arrived." "I know." Han Jin wasn't doubting Catherine's sincerity, but he was having a headache about how to catch the immortal bird. He couldn't just let it fly around until Yelena woke up. He wanted to ask Catherine for help, but he couldn't bring himself to do so, and Catherine obviously misunderstood him. Seeing the immortal bird flying closer and closer, Han Jin had an idea. He quickly rushed forward, and when he was about 600 or 700 meters away, he formed a spell. A ray of white light pierced through the gray sky and shot toward the immortal bird. Han Jin had used a spiritual beast sacrifice material. As long as it was effective, the immortal bird would naturally have a good impression of him. The immortal bird let out a loud cry again, then opened its mouth, and a strange fireball flew out. The inside of the fireball was a raging flame, and its surface was covered with layers of flashing lightning. It was dazzling and extremely fast. In the next moment, the fireball shattered Han Jin's spell, then continued to fly diagonally toward Han Jin. Han Jin waved his hand, and the heavenly path condensed into an extremely long spear, which he flicked toward the flashing fireball. "Be careful," Catherine suddenly said. Han Jin's body froze for a moment, then he immediately retracted his spear and dodged to the side. Boom! The fireball landed on Han Jin's original position, and then a layer of fire expanded like a bubble. In the blink of an eye, it formed a semicircular light curtain about 5 or 6 meters tall and more than 10 meters wide, and then it exploded. Han Jin had just stood still when the fire rolled toward him. He had never seen this kind of flame before. Under the flashing white electric arcs, there were clusters of crazily swaying crimson fire snakes, and there were also countless small golden sparks that were as sharp as needles. Han Jin had a feeling that those sparks were enough to cause fatal damage to him. Han Jin didn't dare to hesitate. He immediately released the earth-shrinking spell and appeared more than 100 meters away. Then, he released another earth-shrinking spell to avoid the wave of fire that followed. "This world is really strange," Catherine sighed. "When I wanted to kill you, I couldn't find the opportunity. When I wanted to make a deal with you, the opportunity came uninvited." Looking at Catherine's gloating smile, Han Jin was stunned for a moment. He suddenly understood the difference between the current Catherine and the previous Catherine. In the past, whether Catherine was joking or angry, she always made people feel a kind of mechanical stiffness and coldness. But now, Catherine was more energetic and lively. The rolling wave of fire swept hundreds of meters away before it slowly calmed down. The undying bird let out a proud cry, as if to say, "Do you know how powerful I am now?" Then, it spread its wings, changed direction, and continued to fly forward. Han Jin felt a lingering fear. Fortunately, he took the initiative to meet it. Otherwise, the undying bird's attack would have engulfed Sunir and the others. "This is the first time I've seen such a perfect elemental fusion," Catherine said. "Congratulations!" "Elemental fusion?" Han Jin asked. "Yes," Catherine said. "Moreover, it's a reborn immortal bird. The nirvana flames it releases can even injure black dragons that are immune to all magic." Han Jin took a deep breath. He was both happy and worried. It was a good thing that Yelena's undying bird was powerful, but how could he catch it? "What's more interesting is that her name is Yelena, right? She also has the ability to release nirvana flame." Catherine laughed. "How wonderful!" Seeing that Catherine was making sarcastic remarks and had no intention of helping, Han Jin changed the topic. There was no need to make a fool of himself. It wouldn't be too late to think of a solution after Catherine left. By the way, Lady Catherine, can I ask you something? You've already asked. Go ahead, Catherine said. How's the battle between Donald and the Black Dragon King Valentine? I'm a fallen angel from the Abyss camp. Isn't it too funny that you're asking me about their battle report? Catherine was stunned for a moment, then laughed. You just said that you don't care who wins or loses. Why can't I tell you? Han Jin asked. What you said makes sense. Catherine thought for a moment and said directly, It's not good. Not good? Han Jin didn't understand. Is it us or the Abyss camp that's not good? Dragon City and Dragon Realm have joined forces to fight against the Black Dragon King Valentine. Nicholas from the Grand Light Empire has shown unimaginable power. He seriously injured Donald's brother, Hating. Donald is rushing over to support him, Catherine said. That's all I know. Dragon City and Dragon Realm have joined forces. Han Jin was really shocked and his heart was beating like a drum. His dirty tricks against Dragon City and Dragon Field couldn't be exposed to the public. If the elders of Dragon City and the guardians of Dragon Field gathered together, all his lies would be exposed. Is it strange? Facing the threat of total annihilation, hatred can be forgotten. Catherine looked interested. This news seems to make you very uneasy. It's nothing. Han Jin coughed. Are you going to wait here for the next few days? Forget it. I know it makes you very uneasy, Catherine said. Catherine said, Let your magic tool. No, let your friend close the abandoned land. He should be able to completely control it. Harley. Han Jin said. Master, how do we do it? Harley shouted. Then I'll have to be rude. Catherine smiled. Black wings of light suddenly stretched out from her back. Then she looked at Han Jin. Are you sure you want to chase me away? That's not what I meant. Han Jin was a bit helpless. His brain was working quickly. Catherine's words clearly had a hidden meaning. He couldn't think of anything bad that would happen if Catherine left. If the abandoned land disappears, that uncontrollable undying bird might turn your city into a purgatory. Catherine's body slowly floated up. Before I act, you have one more chance to choose. Are you sure? Han Jin suddenly realized that he had really ignored it. He smiled bitterly and said, Then, let's wait. Chapter 507. They didn't know how big the abandoned land was, nor did they know how fast the immortal bird could fly. Anyway, after a short while, the immortal bird flew back. This time, it didn't try to fly in another direction. The gray world was full of lifeless mist, and only a few lives existed here. Perhaps it had realized that if it wanted to leave this place, it could only find an opportunity with Han Jin and the others. The immortal bird kept circling thousands of meters away. In fact, it was very nervous. The aura of Sunir and the others was not enough to scare it, and Han Jin, who was meditating, looked like an ordinary person. However, there was also Kathleen here. Probably no one dared to ignore Kathleen's existence, except for the Archangel Alpha. This was a fortunate thing. If the immortal bird was hovering above their heads, the continuous sprinkling of flames would cause a lot of trouble. Harley was still desperately absorbing the power of the abandoned land. This world did give him a very familiar feeling, but he refused to admit it, and he didn't want to have any connection with that Denver. After about half an hour, Han Jin's eyes followed the immortal bird's figure many times. Suddenly, the immortal bird chirped. Perhaps because it was too young and didn't know how to conceal itself, Han Jin could clearly feel that the chirp was full of joy and joy. The next moment, a figure slowly stood up on the back of the immortal bird. It was Yelena, but at this moment, Yelena's image was very different from before. Her whole body was wrapped in a bright red light, swallowing and spitting out flames, and her every movement brought up blooming golden stars. She was majestic, like a goddess bathed in fire. Han Jin raised Tian Dao and slowly approached Yelena. he deliberately slowed down to avoid irritating the immortal bird. Yelena lowered her head and seemed to be observing her right hand. After a moment, she raised her right hand again, loosened it, and clenched it. Han Jin, Sunir, and the others didn't know what Yelena was doing because they didn't see the battle scene. Only Kathleen smiled faintly. Raphael. When Yelena saw Han Jin, she let out a cry of joy. Then, she flew away from the immortal bird and quickly approached Han Jin. Han Jin couldn't help but pause. Although he had left the phoenix, Yelena was still wrapped in the raging thunder fire, which put him in a dilemma. Should he embrace her or retreat? The undying bird behind Yelena let out a panicked cry, as if reminding her to be careful. Sunir and the others below also gasped. They had seen the power of the undying bird, and Yelena didn't seem to be any safer than the undying bird. Yelena, the fire on your body! Sunir shouted. Yelena must have heard Sunir's reminder because her smile became even more joyful. At the moment when the undying bird was truly reborn, although her consciousness was a little fuzzy, she understood a lot of things. After a few breaths, Yelena was leaning into Han Jin's arms. She happily stretched out her little hand and showed off. Look! Yelena was showing off her new power, but Han Jin was still in shock. He had just confirmed that the flames wrapped around Yelena didn't cause him any harm, and he didn't know what Yelena had experienced. He asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Yelena said with a smile. Han Jin didn't celebrate for her, which was somewhat confusing. However, she didn't intend to complain to Han Jin. What's done is done. Yelena poked her head out of Han Jin's arms and looked down. Are Sunir and the others okay? It would have been better if Yelena didn't look, but when she saw Catherine, her body stiffened and her fists clenched. Han Jin felt Yelena's nervousness and whispered, "It's okay. It's okay?" Yelena looked at Han Jin in surprise. "I'll tell you later," Han Jin said. "She's half one of us now." At this time, the undying bird flew over from the side. It spread its wings and hovered in the air, tilting its head to observe Han Jin. When it got closer, Han Jin could see the undying bird clearly through the flames. From its appearance, the undying bird looked like a giant peacock with 7 long feathers behind its tail. There was a golden bulge on its head that looked like a crown. However, its eyes were very childish, or rather, pure, like a human baby that had just been born a few months ago. There was always a strong sense of curiosity in its blinking eyes. "It's okay, but Gibran is injured," Han Jin said. Didn't you go shopping? How did you end up here?" At the mention of this, Yelena became hesitant and stole glances at Han Jin from time to time. Naturally, she had forgotten about Catherine's threat. "Forget it, let's talk about it outside." Han Jin glanced at the undying bird. "Yelena, can you completely control it?" "Baby is very obedient," Yelena said. "Baby?" "Yes, that's the name I gave it." Yelena smiled and tilted her head. "Baby, isn't it?" The undying bird saw that Yelena was talking to it, and its speed increased immediately. Then, it let out a loud cry. Han Jin was relieved. He understood that the relationship between Yelena and the undying bird was similar to his relationship with Harley. When necessary, they could communicate on a certain level of consciousness. "Baby, look at me!" Yelena cried. Then, she took a few deep breaths. The flames wrapped around her body gradually shrank into her body. "Learn from me, okay?" Seeing Yelena's change, the undying bird seemed to understand something and nodded. However, its ability to control was much stronger than Yelena's. It only let out a low cry, and the raging flames retreated like a tide. In the blink of an eye, it turned into an extremely ordinary bird. "Harley?" Han Jin called. Harley slowly raised his head. His body had undergone a very significant change. Below his neck, there was still a mist, but a skull was reflecting a cold light. It was as smooth as glass and as hard as steel. The flickering red light in his eyes became very small, but very bright, as dazzling as the tip of a needle. Close this abandoned land. Han Jin didn't waste time. He could sense how much power Harley had absorbed. Yes, master. Harley seemed to have forgotten that not long ago, he was asking others how to close the abandoned land. Following Harley's incantation, the skeletons scattered all over the plains gradually disintegrated, turning into countless tiny dust particles. The gray world quickly dissipated, and more colors seeped in from the outside. There was a light blue sky, a dim sunset, and wisps of fresh air. Then, the whole world shook violently. The next moment, they were back in the Holy Crown City. Raphael, you finally came out. If you didn't show up in a few minutes, we would have rushed in. Guevara's voice came into the ears of Han Jin and the others. Then, Guevara was stunned. You, Catherine? Catherine's name was like a magic spell. Guevara raised his knight's spear, Gaobin drew his longbow, and Zinggreen blessed himself with a magic shield. Almost all the powerful people in the Holy Crown City gathered here. At this moment, they instinctively made preparations. As long as Catherine showed a little abnormal behavior, they would launch an all-out attack. Catherine seemed indifferent. She just looked at Han Jin seriously and whispered, 3 days. 3 days. Han Jin nodded. Catherine's pair of black wings of light flapped gently. Her body rose from the ground and shot straight to the sky. The wizard tower of the Holy Crown City had already released a magic enchantment that covered the whole city, blocking Catherine's way. But Catherine didn't stop. When she got close to the enchantment, she punched out alternately. Boom, boom. After receiving the power of Catherine's first punch, the enchantment began to shake violently. Then, under the bombardment of the second punch, it immediately turned into a stream of light and scattered. A deafening sound wave swept through the city. The professionals were still fine, but the pedestrians in the city had already covered their ears and showed a painful expression. Han Jin showed a bitter smile. This woman was too violent. Forcibly destroying the enchantment of the Holy Crown City would inevitably cause damage to the wizard towers and bring a lot of trouble to the magicians. They would have to spend a lot of time and energy to repair the enchantment. However, Han Jin had to admit that he couldn't afford to offend her for the time being. Of course, if they were still enemies, he wouldn't be afraid of a fierce battle. But now there was no need. As the saying goes, the unreasonable are afraid of the reckless, and the reckless are afraid of the reckless. Most of the time, those who had concerns always had to make concessions to those who didn't. She just left? Guevara showed a look of disbelief. The reason why Han Jin cared about the damage caused by the Magus Tower was because he was ready to cooperate with Catherine. However, for Guevara, this was the best outcome. Compared to the heavy casualties of his friends, the Magus Tower was nothing. Why didn't she leave? Are you in charge of entertaining her? Han Jin laughed. Raphael, what happened inside? Guevara knew that something unimaginable must have happened inside the enchantment, otherwise Catherine wouldn't have left like this. Let's talk about it when we get back to the ship, Han Jin said. At this moment, a shadow swept over their heads. Guevara looked up and saw a giant bird hovering over them. Although its master was below, the phoenix always maintained a high degree of vigilance against strangers. It would rather leave its master temporarily than blend into the crowd. What a big turkey! Schumann said blankly. What are you talking about? Yelena immediately became unhappy. That's not a turkey. Green was more knowledgeable. An immortal bird. Haha, I actually saw a real immortal bird. Everyone's eyes focused on Yelena. It was no secret that Grand Duke Solomon's mount was an immortal bird. If an immortal bird suddenly appeared in the Holy Crown City, it must have something to do with Yelena. Schumann, lift the curfew. Guevara said, let's go back and talk. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.